Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku Becomes Demonic Monster? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The sports festival showed her that she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or smart enough to last as a hero. And the finals had confirmed it. Despite being ranked first in the academic portion of the exam, she still ended up failing. The constant reminder left her tasting bile for the past few days. Was there truly nothing she could do? Everybody kept talking about how remarkable her quirk was, how powerful it was. So why was it that when she tried to use it when it mattered, it was never enough? Momo ran a hand through her hair, wincing at how greasy it had gotten. If she wasn't careful, this slump could just turn into something worse. Something much worse, closer to depression than anything else. She needed help. I understand your plight, Izuwasen had said to her. His usual glower was softer than normal. But there is little advice I can give you that I haven't already been giving you. You rely on your quirk too much and not enough. She didn't even know what that meant. All Might was no help either. He talked about how it was heroic spirit that mattered, and that she could overcome this obstacle. The encouragement was nice. But she wanted help. Instructions on how to use her quirk better and how to become a better hero. Why not go see the quirk guru? One student had told her. A passing upperclassman had overheard her talking about it to her friend Kyokajiro. He's great with helping people with their quirks and can even make you some great support items. What? His friend slapped him on the shoulder. You're sending her to the support devil. That monster. He's not that bad, but that first year he hangs out with gives me the creeps, constantly referring to her gadgets as her babies. Dude, you're talking about the guy that made the robots for finals last year. I heard that he was so pissed that someone destroyed them that he beat the tar out of them and is building even scarier robots for winter finals this year. Oh man, really? I'm not sure what's scarier, him or his robots. Or that gremlin. Nah man, it's him. He fought Mirio to a standstill last week. You're kidding. How'd he manage that? He's in the support course? Curiosity and a bit of desperation drove her to investigate this man. He was a third year in the support course, a mechanical genius that could give advice on how to use any quirk better. Many called him a demon, others a monster, others called him crazy, but all of them called him the best in the support course. And his name was Izuku Midoriya. With her resolve set, Momo devoted her time after school to try to find this man. She wanted to get his help before summer came in a few weeks. He wasn't in the workshop. Instead, he was located in one of the furthest reaches of U8 Garage 3B. The massive building nearly dwarfed the main UH building in its overall volume, but it was lower to the ground and made of a patchwork assortment of metal and glass. The building hummed with mechanical and industrial noises that grated against her ears. The scent of oil was thick enough that she could taste it. The front of the garage was comprised of a single small door and two massive doors that looked just big enough for one of those zero-point robots to squeeze out of. One of them was open. The sight inside felt like a different world where sparks and flashes of flame replaced the sun, and the silence was long forgotten, replaced by the pounding of hammers, the grunts of men, and the raw power of industry. They were all working on a massive robot. Similar in design to those zero-pointers, but different in a way she couldn't put her finger on. It was probably the extra set of arms and the smaller head. But she never actually fought one of them, so it was strong to actually say. Mei, a cheerful voice shouted from one of the arms. The heavy welder suit he was wearing was bundled around his waist, showing off the green tank top he wore underneath. Gripping a wrench that looked cartoonishly large, he twisted. Even from a distance she could see his muscles flex and bulge under the strain. For a second nothing happened, then the metal groaned and the wrench moved. Activate the white cloud erupted from the arm. She barely managed to get out of the way as it came to an abrupt stop, blanketing the area in a thick and fluffy foam-like material. Emerging from the foam was the man. His thick green hair held on to the suds with the jealous tenacity of a child protecting their candy. His green eyes locked onto hers and he stopped for a second, and shouldered that massive wrench and walked towards a nearby wall, looking back towards the robot. Liquid cannon still needs work, Clean it up and then take a break. We have a guest. A dot of pink appeared from the robot, cackling madly as the sound of a fan humming kicked on. A moment later a girl appeared wearing what looked like a complicated leaf blower on her back that pushed the suds away from the machine. Sorry about that. The man finished wiping himself off with a towel and came to stand in front of her. He placed the wrench down in front of him, his hands resting on the handle like it was the sword of a hilt. The man's face was clean-shaven and didn't match his body with how masculine he was. He was more cute than rugged or manly. The fact that he towered over her only made the difference more apparent. Normally don't get guests all the way out here. I'm Izuku Midoriya. He pointed a finger at himself. Then one towards the pink-haired girl. That's Mei Hatsum. Is there something we can help you with? You're tall? Yes, those were the first words that came out of her mouth. No, she really didn't know why. Maybe it was because she was used to being taller than a lot of boys in her grade. Or maybe it was because the wrench he was leaning on was nearly as tall as she was. I'm only 6'3". Oh, sorry, where are my manners? I'm Momo Yaoyorozu. I'm in class 1A. She placed a hand on hers and gave a small polite bow and smiled up and up at Izuku's ever so slightly immature face. Momo. Izuku tapped a hand on his chin before snapping his fingers. Ah, you made it into the sports festival tournament, right? I wish I could have watched your match, but I was busy preparing for the third-year event. He remembered her name, but she didn't even know Izuku existed until this morning. Oh, you needn't worry yourself. It was a disappointing fight. Izuku snorted and rolled his massive shoulders. Ah, so that's why you're here. You looking for some quirk advice or ideas for a new support item? I'm not sure there's a support item that will help me, she admitted, looking down at the ground. Then she heard him snort and she looked back up at his eyes. He didn't look angry exactly, more like she had just stepped on the ideals that he took a great deal of pride in. As though she attacked some pillar of his personality. Most people think that support items are there to make your quirk stronger, but they also cover your weaknesses and open up new paths for heroes to take. Very few quirks, if any, won't benefit from having a support item. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. It's just that my quirk allows me to make any item I would need. She felt her cheeks redden under his gaze. It felt like she was boasting. But instead, she saw him staring at her with a smile and curiosity written all over his face. It's called creation. I basically need to know the atomic configuration of an object in order to make it, and that's amazing, Izuku shouted, his face exploding into a massive grin. Oh, man, I can't believe you have a quirk like that. It sounds so useful, especially since the atomic configuration for just about every material is a Google search away. I bet you can even change the compound of a steel sword into something harder. You might even be able to make a blade that has a thickness of one molecule like that. What kind of creations have you made? Can you show me? Oh, I don't keep any of the items I make. His eyebrows furrowed and his smile vanished. Why? Keeping them would ruin the local economy. It's why I never make things out of diamonds or other precious. Are you stupid? Izuku interrupted her with a question that left her stunned. Those words struck her already deflated self-confidence like two perfectly shot arrows. All she had to cling on right now was that she got good grades. Most people agreed with her, others praised her for having foresight, but this was the first time anybody had ever told her she wasn't just mistaken, she was wrong. And from his soft frown, she was very wrong. That was a bit harsh. I'm sorry. He flexed his fingers and allowed his shoulders to slump. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes. When he opened them, she felt his intensity. It's just a pet peeve when people are holding themselves back for arbitrary reasons. How is it arbitrary? I could easily destroy the local economy if I abused my quirk. Her words didn't have much bite in them, if any. It just felt like she was trying to defend herself when she knew she was wrong. Yeah, I guess if you made rare metals and sold them. But think about it. You have a quirk that allows you to make anything, but you don't have anything to show for it. He shrugged and rolled his shoulders. From what you said, it feels like you're using your quirk in a reactionary manner. You wait to see what you need, then make it. That isn't a bad thing, but you can enter an encounter more prepared. You can enter an encounter more prepared with complex support items that only you can make. He held up his hand and sighed. I imagine speed is a big factor of your quirk. You have to basically recall atomic order, then assemble it in your mind before your body creates it. As good as being able to react to every situation is, there are times where already being prepared can make that much of a difference. He had a point. Just going in already equipped with something could make a world of difference. Even if it wasn't exactly what she needed at the time, it would be something. You're right, speed is a big factor. The bigger and more complicated something is, the harder it is to make. But what do you suggest I start with? Honestly, he tilted his head from side to side as though he was deciding what deal would be the best. Joining the support course? That wasn't what she wanted to hear. So you're telling me to give up? What? I'd never tell someone to give up on being a hero. He waved off the notion like the thought was little more than rain on a Wednesday and not a life-changing choice. You have a technical quirk. While you'd gain a lot of experience in the hero course, your technical abilities would be neglected. Do you know who Puppeteer is? No, I can't say I'm familiar with that hero. It sounded like it'd be a common enough name. Not surprising, he's a French hero. He can control things like puppets with his quirk. Doesn't sound very useful, does it? He waited for her to nod before continuing. That's why he enrolled in the support course for his first 2 years, so he could learn the skills he needed to make an army of puppets for a variety of uses, even one that lets him fly. Even Best Genist took support classes while he learned to develop his quirk. I understand what you're saying, but she bit her lip. She liked her class. She didn't want to leave the hero course. Izuku sighed and popped his neck once. In my opinion, this will help you become a great hero. But I can understand why you're so reluctant. So join the engineering club after school. The only other member is that gremlin. He pointed towards the far corner where a pile of scraps sat, and that pink-haired girl Mei was currently working on some project. She's weird, but she might be better than making support gear than I am. When it's not exploding. Izuku winced and gave a soft laugh. But anyways, if you join us, I'll help you develop gear that only you can make, and I'm sure I could figure out new ways for you to use your quirk as we go along. That's very kind of you, Izuku. She placed a hand over hers, looking up at him. But what do you get out of it? Not a lot. He licked his lips and a smile grew to split his face. But I have to admit, I'd like to see what your quirk can do if you really unleashed its potential. Very well then, I'll be happy to accept your offer, Izuku. She extended a hand out to him. His own hand nearly devoured hers. It wasn't the bone-crushing handshake she thought it would be, but it was very, very firm. Great, now let's get started. May get the hazmat suits, and are you familiar with isotopes? What did she just agree to? She felt like a test subject. When it came to pushing her limits, Izuku was a weird mix between SLV driver and supportive couch. After a lecture on just how much raw iron is mined from the earth and how completely useless it is when it's not refined into steel, he forced her into making a 1/4 ton of material just to find out what her limits were. By his logic, forcing her to collapse once was better than having her collapse on accident once. And then he lectured her on how she shouldn't say she can't make objects out of living material when she's constantly making wood. Which was a dead living thing. But there was something she didn't quite understand. What was with those weird nicknames the other students gave him? Resolving herself to find out more about him, Momo once again put her information-gathering skills to the test. And there was nobody better to ask than Mei, the only other person she'd seen Izuku talk with. May I eat with you today, Mei? Momo asked, standing just off to the side of the girl. Both of their trays were nearly overflowing with food. She was going to need it tonight. Mei looked up from her pile of food that was nearly as large as her own and blinked a few times, her dirty yellow eyes looking her up and down. Then her eyes went wide and a smile appeared on the girl's face. Oh, you're that new girl from last night. I already forgot your name. That's because I didn't quite get the chance to introduce myself. I'm Momo Yaoyorozu. I look forward to working with you in the future. She sat down and extended a hand towards the girl. Mei looked at the hand for a moment as though it were a foreign object before shaking it. Her grip was rough and firm. Mei had some, and Izuku said I should start thinking of ways to use your quirk for materials I can't make. And that if you complain, I'm supposed to remind you that some vaccines are made from non-living material to guilt trip you. Oh, is that so? He certainly knew how to manipulate people by being both abrasive and right at the same time. Perhaps that was part of his reputation. Still, after talking to him, he had been right about several of her concerns. Namely that unless she was going to actually try and ruin the economy by producing nothing but gold or consumer electronics, she really didn't have a lot to worry about. Yep, I've been thinking about a lot of stuff for us to make later. Oh, but we can get started right now if you want. Mei's eyes sparkled as she continued to shovel food into her mouth. It wasn't quite as gross as some of the boys devoured their food. Momo shook her head and began to eat her food, taking measured bites to ensure that she'd be able to finish her meal in time. At least she was with company that wouldn't care if she talked and ate. At least not with her mouth full of food. I'd prefer to wait until after classes. But I would like to ask you some questions. Sure. Are they about my babies? I can tell you a lot about them, like the automatic stabilizer, or I was actually hoping to know a bit more about Izuku. Oh, of course you do. Mei, as it turned out, had an absolutely adorable pout. Fine, what do you want to know about him? Well, I was just wondering why he has so many names. Quirk, Guru, Monster, Support Devil, and a bunch of others. Really, with names like those, she was surprised she didn't find out about him until just yesterday. Then again, she barely knew the names of anybody outside of the hero department. Outside of Izuku and Mei, she had no clue who was in the support department and who was in the general department. Was it really meant to be so isolated? No idea. He was called those things before I came to you. Mei shrugged, leaning back in her seat. I do know that Power Loader Sensei trusts him enough to give him the keys to the workshop and that he's in charge of a lot of stuff for a student. It's why I follow him around. If I listen to him, he lets me work on my babies for a while. If I do a good job, I've gotten so much work done because of it. I see, that was helpful, Mei. It wasn't really. She had gathered that much yesterday, especially with Izuku being in charge of things that most students just weren't. Like all the robots that they fight during and other exercises. Even the medical drones that wheeled people to the infirmary. A girl with long blue hair that extended all the way down to her waist and a bubbly smile slid down right next to Mei. Are you talking about Izuku? What do you want to know? Why do you want to know? Who are you? Do you want to make a bunch of cool stuff? Oh, hi, I'm Nijire Hato, by the way. What's your name? The girl hummed, swaying in her seat, and broke her chopsticks. She looked vaguely familiar. Maybe she was another support student. I'm Momo Yayarozu, and yes, I was trying to understand more about Izuku. He's helping me with my quirk after school. She placed a hand on her sissy and nodded towards the bubbly blue-haired girl. Oh, so you're the one that he was so mad about this morning? Nijire took a bite of rice, her cheeks puffing up like a rabbit's as she chewed. He kept talking about how you were wasting your potential and not applying yourself. Why is that? What potential? What quirk do you have? He's mad at me. That stung more than she cared to admit. Why? Oh, don't worry about that. He just gets mad when he thinks someone isn't using their quirk right. He's weird like that. Nijire continued to eat and talk. But what did you want to know about him? What happened to all of her earlier questions? This girl seemed sporadic. I was just curious why he's called the support devil, and why he has all those other nicknames. Oh, that's an easy one. During our first sports festival, he showed up with a power suit he made and then got really far in the tournament. They banned power suits after that. Then during our second sports festival, he showed up with a bunch of support items that would counter all the other quirks. That's why they put limits on the number of support items you can bring instead of just how much you could carry. Nijire swallowed and took a drink of her juice before she continued. So this year he showed up with just a wrench and only ended up losing to Mirio. He's kind of an unofficial member of the Big Three. The Big Three. Why did it feel like there was a whole world in UH that her class just didn't know about? Was it Aizawa's fault? She felt like she could blame him. Nijire's eyes went wide. Well, wider. What? You don't know. We're called the Big Three because we're the three strongest students at U. And Mirio is the best of us. He won the sports festival this year. I came in second and Tamaki came in third. Izuku was fourth. Oh, so it was just the third years that won in the sports festival. That made sense. But if Izuku is so strong, why is he in the support course? Because he doesn't have a quirk? Nijire's smile didn't fade as she said that. She pointed her chopsticks at Momo and nodded to herself. He doesn't have a quirk. Then how did he get so far in the sports festival? Izuku was tall and looked really strong, but that could only get so far. Then again, even with her own quirk she probably couldn't beat him in a fair fight. But with someone like Katsuki or anyone with a strong combat quirk, he should have lost. Because he's a badass, Nijire beamed at her. When he's not doing support work he's training, sometimes he does both at once. Oh I know, why don't we go watch them after we finish eating? Watch them? What are they doing? Oh you'll see. XXXX, Izu, the blonde, tall, muscular and very shirtless man shouted from one side of the circle. The circle reminded her of the dojo that her middle school had for sports clubs. Numerous sets of workout equipment lined the walls, from free weights to complicated contraptions that looked like if she stepped into them she'd be torn limb from limb. Nijire led her and Mei, who was at this point a captive, up the wooden stands that sat along another wall. A few other students were also watching with interest. Izuku stomped his foot and slapped his legs. He struck a fearsome pose of flung his head back, a sight that would have made him look more intimidating if he didn't have a band holding his hair back. He was wearing a similar tank top to the one that he wore yesterday, but instead of his heavy work pants he had on a relaxed pair of cotton pants. Mirio Izuku roared, holding his hands out like they were claws. Bring it! Bare feet struck the mat as Mirio charged at Izuku. He was fast. Really fast. And powerful. He leapt up into the air, bringing his heel down towards Izuku. She could feel the impact as Izuku caught the foot, his muscles bulging to stop his foe's assault. Why did they shout each other's names like that? Mei asked as Nijire sat her down. The girl had wanted to go to the workshop to work on some projects. But Nijire had refused and dragged both of them here. Izuku pushed back on Mirio's assault, moving in with a blow that would have snapped her in half, his feet firmly planted on the ground, giving him a foundation stronger than any castle. He twisted and threw Mirio behind him. With more dexterity, speed, and grace than she would have thought possible from a man of Mirio's size, he flipped midair and landed on his feet, one knee barely touching the ground. Then the real assault began. It's because they're guys. Guys really like to shout at each other while they fight. Nijire sighed, sitting between her and Mei. Her eyes sparkled as she watched the two powerhouses go at it. No quirks were shown in the fight, but she could feel each blow. How were they so strong? All at once the fight seemed to shift. Izuku's strong foundation shattered like water bursting from a DMN as he began to use his entire body to attack. Hands, arms, elbows, knees, legs, feet, every part of him became a weapon as Mirio was forced to take on a more defensive role. The sound of flesh slamming into flesh echoed throughout the building. In a way, it was appealing. Far different from the straight-up brawling that most of the boys in her class followed. This was purposeful, it was a technique, a style. It was art. Deku, a voice she knew all too well, shouted from the other end of the hall. It was Katsuki Bakugu, the boy from her class that had a mouth that was as loud as it was foul. He charged towards the fight powered by his explosive hands. I finally found you, Yudim. Izuku didn't so much as flinch as Katsuki drew in. He shifted his stance again, bouncing on the ball of his feet, and spun out of Katsuki's path, while grabbing onto the blonde boy's head and twirling him around, before flaming him into the mat with a thud. It's still 5 years too soon for you to beat me, Katsuki, and don't call me Deku's the strongest fighter in her class. In her whole grade. Was just put in his place like he was nothing. Just what kind of monster was Izuku? And why was her heart racing from that fight so much? There was a rush the moment her feet hit the padded ring where Izuku and Mirio had been fighting moments ago. She could still see their movements like art in motion, each blow resonating like the drums in an orchestra. She had always thought of fighting as a brutal reality of being a hero. So how did Izuku and Mirio make it look so appealing? Let go of me, Katsuki squirmed, both hands behind his back, palms down, an effective way to neutralize his quirk. Like a wild animal, he flailed his legs and even tried to use his chin to move forward. If he was anything, Katsuki was tenacious. I'll kick your butt, yeah? Izuku rolled his eyes as he shifted so that his knee was holding the smaller blonde boy down. You're going to kick my butt, just like when I was your babysitter? No, really, how have you not grown up at all? Peace off, Deku, Katsuki, she said firmly, striding up to him with one hand on her hip. She didn't have the greatest combat or heroic ability, but she was still the vice president of her class. You are aware that assaulting another student is grounds for suspension, correct? And that goes double for using your quirk to attack someone outside of the hero course. Even if they are Izuku. Shut it, high class. Seriously, that's a girl you're talking to? Izuku looked over to her, the sweat dripped from his face and he smiled at her. He looked so nonchalant about the whole thing she almost forgot about Katsuki. Oh, hey there Momo, came to watch me fight Mirio? Oh hey, do you think you can make me a pair of socks? Sure. She conjured a pair of socks. She had no idea if they were even his size, but they wouldn't ruin the economy. Izuku took them. Why, they make a really good GG. With zero hesitation, Izuku plopped the pair of socks into Katsuki's mouth, effectively muting the violent blonde boy. But it also made him a lot more angry. Oh, settle down, I could have wiped my sweaty armpits with them first. Izuku, that's foul. Even still she wanted to smile at the thought. He just shrugged and patted Katsuki on the head. Yeah, well, so's his mouth. Seriously, do you have any idea how traumatizing it is to have a kid you're supposed to be babysitting constantly call you useless and shitty? Oh, by the way, Momo, this is Mirio. Izuku gestured towards a muscular boy that was quickly putting on his shirt. He was tall, but not as tall as Izuku, but their builds were similar. And much like Izuku, he had a face that looked just a bit too young for his body. He's probably the closest one to surpassing All Might as number one, even among the pros. Not you too, Izuku, Mirio half laughed, his boyish face blushing at the praise. I still have a long way to go before I'm anywhere near the top. Izuku snorted and tapped Katsuki on the head before pointing his thumb at her. Anyways, Mirio, this is Momo. We're going to see if she can help you today after class. We are? She asked Izuku before shaking her head. Manners. She had just been introduced to one of the strongest students at UA, one that Izuku had openly praised. She extended her hand out towards him and smiled. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mirio. Do you know what Izuku is talking about? Nice to meet you as well, Momo. And no, I rarely have any idea what our mutual friend is talking about. Mirio's grip was strong and he gave a sharp chuckle. He seemed friendly enough, at least compared to the other blonde in the room. She had no doubt that he could handle Katsuki as effortlessly as Izuku could. That makes three of us. Izuku stood, picking up Katsuki with him. I'll talk to you more about it later. Now to see what Aizawa has to say about you using your quirk in the gym. When she arrived in class minutes later, she found out that Katsuki not only had detention until summer vacation, but also had to write a letter of apology to Izuku before he could go on the training trip. Part of her doubted he'd be able to complete such a task. XXXX, alright, Momo. Izuku clapped his hands. Are you ready to get started today? He was wearing an old t-shirt that had the words t-shirt on it, faded and stained with various fluids from bleach to oil. The sleeves were ripped off. She hadn't seen him wear sleeves. Ever. Was he allergic to sleeves? Well, with arms like his, she really couldn't blame him. The giant robot still loomed as an intimidating centerpiece of the garage, and Mei was in her corner already working on some project. Flanking Izuku was Mirio, who was dressed in the standard UE uniform. Flying in the background, she caught a glimpse of that blue-haired girl she met earlier, Nijar. Raising an eyebrow, she couldn't help but wonder what exactly they could need from her. What exactly are you planning? You make it sound like it's a harebrained scheme. He pulled out a packet of paper and handed it to her. Remember when I said that there were things in this world that only you can make? Well, that's what we're going to do today. You're going to make a shirt for Mirio that he can use with his quirk. She looked at the packet. The first page was the molecular structure of a hair. The next was a fabric that used a bit of that hair. What? Izuku nodded towards Mirio and smiled. Show her your quirk. And keep your pants on. I wouldn't want her to see my willy if it wasn't needed. Mirio pouted and his shirt fell from his body and onto the ground. Like he hadn't even been wearing it. You see, my quirk is permeation, Nijire shouted as she floated through Mirio's Z like he wasn't even there. She was upside down, her hair trailing along the solid part of his body before falling in front of him. It makes it so that he can pass through everything. That includes air, so right now he's holding his breath. She sped up and darted around to land beside him. When I use it on my head, I also can't see or hear anything. It's a bit like I'm falling in absolute darkness, no sight, no sound, nothing but the feeling of falling. Mirio stuck out his teeth. It took a lot of work for me to be able to use it properly, and I owe a lot to Izuku over here. But I really have no idea what he has planned. Izuku just rolled his shoulders. I really didn't do a lot. But, as you can imagine, we can't exactly have Mirio fight naked. Previously, a support company took his hair and managed to make a suit for him to fight in. In theory, you should be able to recreate that material and give Mirio something he can actually train in. But I can't really do living material. She looked at the sheet, then back at Izuku and Mirio. Izuku pulled out a sock, one of the ones she made earlier. You made this out of wool. Wool is basically sheep hair. You can totally make him some training clothes so people will see less of his privates. I can understand why it'd be important. She ignored the blush at the idea of making underwear for Mirio. But how is this supposed to help me become a better hero? Oh, that's not all you're going to be doing today. Part of your problem is speed. I watched your fight in the sports festival last night. The other part of the problem is that half the time you don't know how to use what you made. Have you ever used a shield? Or a staff? Making a weapon means nothing if you've never used it before. But the second part will happen later. Izuku walked over to a table and picked something up. It looked like a mask, like a harder gray version of the one that she would wear if she were sick. This is a gas mask I made. It's lightweight and should be easy for you to make. He tossed it to her and smiled. You'll be making both the material for Mirio using your arms or hands. But for the gas mask you need to make it right over your mouth. I think you might even be able to have it partially inside of your skin as well by not actually fully manifesting it. Oh, and you're going to do both at the same time. Both? She asked, looking at the gas mask. It was much smaller than the ones she could already make. But how was it different? And then she had to memorize a new material to create. Aren't you asking a bit much from me? You want to be a hero, right? Rise to the occasion. He waved her off and started working at his station again. It already felt impossible. Oh wow, he's going easy on you. Nijire bounced over to her and looked at the mask, picking it up and messing with it. When he was teaching me how to fly, he threw me into a pit and told me I wouldn't get dinner. Izuku taught you how to fly? Momo felt her eye twitch as she looked at the man. She was starting to understand why he was called a demon. No doubt many that asked him for help felt as though they were making a deal with the devil for greater power. Yep, he also helped Mirio figure out how to do this teleporty thing by doing the same thing. He has a really high standards for heroes, so I think he likes you. Nijire hopped up into the air and flew back towards the giant robot. He won't ever ask you to do anything that he doesn't think you can do. Even if his standards are really high and meeting his expectations will make him expect more from you. Mirio walked forward and tucked in his shirt. His smile nearly split his face as he leaned in close, holding his hand up like it was a wall between them and Izuku. But you want to know a secret? She nodded, still speechless over exactly what she had gotten herself into. I haven't seen him so excited about a quirk before. I think you really inspired him. So just bear with it and I'm sure great things will happen. This was torture. There was no other way to put it. Sure, she was doing this to herself by her own volition, and that it was technically training. The manner in which she was doing it was far beyond that. It was a unique form of torture born out of the frightening realms of Izuku's mind. She had no doubt now he had earned his nicknames twofold. Not because of some outward cruelty. No, Izuku was actually rather kind. Rather, it was his expectations that were the real kicker. They were great. So great that they touched the realm of impossibility but remained grounded in the possible. He gave his all for everything and he expected that from everyone else. Which was why she was currently producing gas masks on her face so that they would be partially fused to her skin for a few seconds. While producing a variety of string-like substances from her elbows as their compounds appeared on a screen, while she was being suspended by said string on what might as well be a giant fishing reel. All while she secreted paint from her toe and attempted to write something. Izuku suggested poetry. It was, At first, but after falling a few times into the dark frigid water down below, she had started writing swear words. Oh, and her hands were tied in front of her, so her stomach was currently screaming like she had just done every single sit-up she had ever done in a matter of minutes. She felt as much as she heard Izuku standing in the doorway of the torture room he had made just for her. But instead of speaking immediately, he jumped up to grab at the bar that sat at the top of the doorway and began doing pull-ups. No matter what he was doing, Izuku always found a way to work out. It probably explained why he was so fit. That and he was insane. You know, Izuku barely grunted as he shifted into doing one-handed pull-ups with an ease that made her jealous. He hung there like a monkey for a moment, his legs tucked behind him as he smiled at her. When I hadn't heard you fall in for a while, I half expected you to have given up. He was goading her, or he was trying to ruin her concentration. Either way, she only had one real option. Glare at him. With a thought, she pushed the rest of the gas mask off of her face and watched it fall into the water with the same plunk she had heard a dozen or so times by now. You didn't hear that? Izuku laughed and hooked his legs onto the bar and began doing upside-down sit-ups. Clearly, if you're able to keep that up and talk, I need to add something else to your training. You want to try doing it with weights on your back? Oh, or with both feet at the same time. She made a gas mask to stop herself from screaming at him. She couldn't even argue with him about what she was capable of. It felt like in just a few sentences he understood her quirk better than she did. Still though, you're getting, Izuku began but then stopped when a slam came from further down the garage. Still hanging from his bar, he twisted back behind him to look down the hallway. Oh, hey there Izuwasen-sensei, what brings you all the way out here? Izuwasen-sensei was here. But did she miss an extra class for failing the practical? Wait, he might not even be looking for her. Izuku. I'm not interrupting anything, am I? Why did he sound less annoyed than normal? Maybe he actually liked Izuku. Well, they were both sadistic. Izuku twisted again and looked at her from an angle too awkward for someone of his size to be making easily. He looked her up and down before returning to look at Izuwa-sensei. Nah, I can talk what you need. I was hoping to see if you could make some specialty training equipment for the first years after summer. Aizawa stood in front of the door, hands in his pockets, like it was perfectly normal to talk to someone currently upside down and backwards. Then he made eye contact with her and paused. Ah, Momo, it's good that you're here as well. I see you've taken it upon yourself to improve. She plopped the gas mask off of her mouth and nodded. Yes, sensei, Izuku agreed to help me. Aizawa gave a small smile that meant he was proud of her. Good. I was going to talk to you about your development soon. Given how you passed the written exam but failed the practical exam, the extra classes at camp wouldn't help you. And if you're getting help from Izuku, I will entrust you to his care. You can still attend the training camp if you wish. It was official. Hey, wait, does that mean I'm going to get paid? Izuku asked as he did another sit-up. Don't you already make more than me? Aizawa groaned, scratching his head. If you really want to get paid more, talk to Nizu. I'm not in charge of that. Nah, it's fine, I was just joking anyways. I'm happy to help Momo. Now do you have any designs ready? Or the string that had been holding her up snapped. She had barely enough time to eat before she splashed down into the cold water once more. It was fortunate that she wasn't wearing her school uniform for multiple reasons. The most important of which was that it had the unfortunate habit that when wet enough it was all but transparent. She spluttered to the surface and took a gasp of air, half resting on the metallic ledge that made for a terrible pillow. She looked to Izuku, who was hanging upside down with one eyebrow raised like a curious monkey. I'm out of fuel. Ah, right, thought you might be getting to that limit. I was going to say take a break, but instead we're going to be moving on to a different part of your training. Oh, and we'll be getting food first. Yay, she half muttered, keeping her head against the metal. The water was cold. Almost too cold to be comfortable. But at the same time it felt really good. XXXX, all the anger and frustration she had towards Izuku vanished the moment he slapped down one of the biggest, meanest looking steaks she had ever seen. Complete with a mountain of sides that made her feel like she had never eaten a proper meal in her life. Manners left the wayside as she stuck the steak with her fork and took the biggest bite she could out of its side, letting the juices fall down her chin. Just remember to breathe. Izuku laughed, placing a glass down next to her. They were eating in a room towards the back of the garage. The thick wooden tables were marred with dents and various marks that ranged from paint to pen. Tools hung on most of the walls, save for one where a roll-down projector screen was located. A computer was set up near the end of one of the tables where Izuku sat, the 3 monitors beaming to life. She cut the next bite of the steak and resisted the urge to in delight. She wasn't sure if it was actually the best steak she had ever eaten or if she was just that hungry. The projector came to life, displaying a desktop that was covered in various design programs. The mouth moved towards one. While you devour that steak like a champ, we're going to be talking about what we're going to be doing this weekend. Izuku stuck in a flash drive and loaded up a bunch of crude designs. Because you're now basically my unofficial official apprentice, you're going to help me with your sensei's orders? She swallowed and took a sip of the drink. It was sweet, but wasn't quite juice and not quite tea. It tasted fine. It'll take a while before I can use my quirk in bulk again. She really didn't think she had been doing that training for so long. Oh, I wasn't going to have you use your quirk for these. We're going to be working on your macro engineering skills, so that way in the future if you need to make something actually huge you'll be able to handle it. Probably not in a fight against villains, but in a disaster or rescue operation. He laughed. Though making a giant robot is fun. She nodded, slowly chewing on her most recent bite of steak. That makes sense, but where's Mei at? Isn't she your real apprentice? Kind of. I'm more like her babysitter. Izuku nodded, his leg bouncing up and down on his stool. She made the main workshop explode twice in her first week, so now she's mine. And I'm not going to have her help me with these things. Mostly because we need to work on your design abilities if you're going to stand on your own 2 feet as a hero. Izuku showed her a half-dozen or so blueprints, often modifying them along the way. A lot of them were rather large and technical as well. The slides came to a slow. Her plate was clean and her stomach was more than full. Her mind spinning with the flood of information Izuku could spew off at a given notice. But something still bothered her. I understand that larger constructs will be useful in rescue or disaster situations, but what can I do for villains? You keep saying that I should be prepared with my own custom gear, that being prepared is much better than being able to adapt. But I don't know what I would make. Despite much of her time going into improving her quirk, that improvement was less than half of what she needed. Izuku hummed and clicked on the computer, grabbing a new file and opening it up. To reveal a gun. No, it was different than a gun. I've been playing with a few ideas, but it's up to you to figure out how to make them work. This design is something of a cannon for your quirk. It makes use of your ability to have something still function inside of you. In theory, you basically turn your arm into the cannon, and then you can create things inside your arm and blast them outwards. You can do this with knockout gas, nets, and if you want you can probably make a powerful energy blast as well. Maybe even plasma. What makes you think I can shoot an energy blast? Momo, you can SHT out fully charged batteries. All we have to do is just skip the battery part and bam. Or just go straight into plasma. You can make gas canisters and dry ice. You're not limited to just solids. Izuku changed the slide again, smiling at her. But that's not where your quirk's true strength lies. Once your control is great enough, I think I know what your real ace is. A small detailed robot appeared on the screen, going over its components, the exact amount of material needed to create it. And it's a list of functions. It was long, and continued to scroll down and down and down. Izuku stood up and tapped on the projections. In this day and age, you are the only person that even has a chance of making something like this. And even then, I don't know if you can. What is it? She asked, feeling the weight of Izuku's words. Microbots? In theory, she had the advantage. She was taller, had longer reach, and had more weight than Nijire did. But all that was easily surpassed by one key thing that Nijire had that she did not. The actual fighting skill in hand-to-hand combat. And if the girl were to use her quirk? You're thinking too much, Izuku chided from the edge of the mats. Despite the smile on his face, the teasing kind, she was growing to loathe. His arms were folded across his knee and a low eyebrow was raised in a disapproving manner. You need to act and think. I'm trying, she grunted as Nijire, who was a small, angry hornet's nest of blue hair, fists, elbows, and knees came at her once again with a ridiculous spinning move that had far more weight and power in it than the smaller girl should have been able to produce. You're not trying strong enough. If you must think when you breath in. Then act when you breath out. He made a mock breathing technique gesture with his arms by forming a circle then pressing his hands together. That way you'll only fail half the time. Nijire's heels slammed down from above her. A heart-filled smile of pure joy was on the girl's face, even as sweat gathered around the headband that kept what hair didn't fit into her ponytail back. Like an axe chopping wood, Nijire shattered her defenses and then took another step back, entering her striking range. The girl still bounced ready for more. How on earth was she not tired? Momo had gotten more bruises today than she had in her entire lifetime. Her muscles were screaming at her to stop, and she could feel every breath she took. And here she thought learning to fight would be a break from Izuku's exceedingly brutal expectations. Nope. More of the same. Shut up, she shouted, conjuring a roll of bandage tape she would need later and chucked it at Izuku. You're not helping, you're distracting me. Izuku whistled as the roll hit him square in the sea. He didn't even react to it. Oh wow, I thought you couldn't make living things, but here you are actually growing a spine. Why are you like this? Oh, Nijire bounced up and down, still so full of energy it made her sick. It's how he copes with being quirkless and thus can't become a real hero. Nijire, honey, Mirio said softly from the sidelines. His shoulders slouched, and he made a slight pushing gesture as though to put back whatever Nijire had just opened up. Remember what we said about being too blunt and hitting the nail on the head? Nijire's arms flopped to her side as she looked at Izuku. Sorry, no, it's fine, Nijire. Izuku's brow twitched. He was annoyed now. I was just thinking about strapping the new super dense weights onto you. Nijire shot up. What? No, I like flying. Before anybody could comment further, Nijire darted out of one of the large doors and flew off. Well, there went her opponent. That meant it was break time, right? Yeah, it was break time. This was not how she thought learning to fight would have gone. She expected actual lessons. Not getting her butt kicked for hours on end by a blue-haired Energizer bunny. She fell onto her back. The combination of the cool mat, her sweat, and her white shirt did little to cool her off. Really, she just wanted to dive into the pool and float. It was the first day of summer vacation, and naturally, instead of going out to spend time with her friends and family, Izuku had commandeered most, if not all, of her free time. The man was a workaholic. And it seemed like the only ones that could keep up with him were the top hero students in the school. Hell, some of their teachers looked at him like he was insane. A few might even be afraid of him. All Might was slightly jumpy when she saw them pass in the hallway. All Might, the top pro, was afraid of Izuku. He really was a devil, one that she had signed her soul and freedom to for power. If only it was just slightly less grueling. Drink up, we'll be working on your staff work. Izuku placed her water bottle right next to her head. He lazily twirled a padded staff in his hand like he was a bored student fiddling with her pencils. I'm probably not the best teacher for this, but I think I have the basics down. Her stomach screamed at her while she sat up and grabbed the water bottle. It was cool and nice. And her shirt was clinging to her in a weird way that made it annoying to move. She half stared at Izuku and half glared at him. It wasn't like he had just been standing there the whole time while he watched Nijire kick her, but he had been sparring with Mirio as well, and running on the treadmill and lifting weights, and had basically done an entire workout. Why don't you make your own staff? Don't worry about the padding. But make the tips like some kind of a spongy thing that will leave red dye when you actually hit me. He went through several motions that looked just a bit too complicated for a beginner with just the staff and nodded to himself. That way it's a bit like a shocking staff for when you... He looked at the staff and then tossed it to the side. Actually, you can just make a taser and zap them from long range. Or if you're forced into close combat, just make like taser knuckles. Man, your quirk is fun. Sucks that I wasted so much time on YouTube though. Anyways, you're going to fight me. Wouldn't it be better if you actually taught me how to fight? She groaned, standing up. I am teaching you. This is how I learned. And my teacher was a lot scarier than I am. Izuku shrugged. Mirio shook his head and mouthed no. Fine, just go easy on me. She rolled her shoulders, finding her sweat-soaked shirt far too constricting at the moment. Nijire had been wearing just a sports BR. and hers covered more of her body. Besides, she trusted these two. That was it, the shirt was coming off. 1 second. The cool air felt good against her skin and she tossed her shirt to the side. It landed with a wet splat. That felt so much better. Wow, put a shirt on. Izuku's voice was firm as always, but there was something else in it she didn't recognize. Please. She blinked, looking at her sports BR. Her hero costume was much more revealing than this. Why? Because you're ridiculously hot and it's distracting? Oh, she squeaked, her voice going up an octave or two. She was hot. Izuku thought she was attractive. That made her face feel all the hotter. But what about Nijire and Mei? I see them wearing less all the time. Nijire is more like my annoying little sister. I'm aware that she's cute, but there's no attraction there. Izuku admitted now, staring right at her. And it's easy to forget that Mei is human. She's basically a pet. I just make sure she doesn't ruin the furniture, leave out food and water for her, and let her out to tinkle. I see, then that meant that Izuku felt some attraction to her. Was it just physical? Was it a good thing? What would she do if he asked her out? Would he ask her out? There was no way. He was going to graduate soon and he was her tutor, she'd have to refuse. Momo, Izuku barked. Shirt please. Oh right, she didn't even think and made a simple cotton compound and slipped it on. The thick straps of her sports bra could still be seen and it was loose enough that it would appear every so often. Better. Yep, now get ready, by the end of today you're going to know how to throw a punch. Training with Izuku was a lot different than training with Nijire or any of her other classmates. It was like taking a test with the teacher standing behind her and telling her every mistake as she made it. Sometimes before she made it. Sometimes he grabbed her, and she flew before landing on her back. As the spar continued, it began to change. Growing slower, with her flaws being explained by Izuku while telling her what she did right. They stopped actually fighting. Instead he began to guide her movements, first demonstrating simple jabs, then the follow-ups. All while changing her entire stance. He was better at sharing his knowledge than any private tutor she had growing up. In just one day she already felt like she was better than in the morning. And all the concern of Izuku being attracted to her had long since faded with that familiar frustration he brought out of people. That was until... No, here like this? Izuku's breath hit the back of her neck. His face brushing up against hers. His hand slithered along her arm and grabbed her wrist like a viper strike. His foot moved her foot, his leg between hers. Now, hold this stance, you'll be able to strike better. Can you feel that? She could feel something all right, but it had nothing to do with her stance. It was the heat spreading through her body. The thought that she could turn her head just an inch and embrace Izuku. Still she nodded, biting her lip and waiting for him to release her. Our light try, a young Togata, and young Midoriya and Miss Yaoyoro's All Might's voice boomed from the entrance of the gym. He was wearing his usual too-tight yellow suit. And as always his smile was as bright as could be. Forgive me for interrupting, but I wish to speak to the two of you. In private. The scowl on Izuku's face was strong to miss. Sure thing, All Might sir. Mirio gave a mock salute and looked towards Izuku, smiling twice as bright as All Might was. Come on Izuku, our sensei wishes to speak to us. Sorry Momo. Izuku patted her on the shoulder, the anger leaving him. Why don't you rest up? And work on your radio skills? Do you remember the frequency we talked about? She nodded. 232, 5 Hz. What? Just a project. Being able to use radio frequencies could be useful if cell phones aren't an option. Izuku shrugged and headed towards All Might. He did not look pleased. Momo bit her lip, eyes locked onto her finger. Large things were taxing, but pretty easy to make, and even easier to keep partially submerged into her body. Hand-sized stuff was also easy. And making some kind of a transmitter was also pretty easy. But keeping it inside of her body and still function was difficult. A smile spread across her face as an antenna sprouted from her pointer finger. The nearby receiver lit up green, detecting her device. She resisted the urge to squeal in delight. Izuku's workshop tended to echo when she did, and that would make Mei stop her projects just enough to look over at her. Still, after an hour of failures, she had finally completed her task. All things considered, today had been pretty great. The sound of metal slamming into metal followed Izuku's shout as he came storming into the workshop. His face a mask of fury. He grabbed the wrench off the wall and threw it towards some scrapped machine. Damn it, shock ran over her. She had seen Izuku mad or annoyed before. It seemed to be his default state. But he always kept his cool. To see him like this was terrifying. She moved from the bench to try and say something to him. Izuku, Mirio, came in after him. The frown on his face spoke volumes. Something had happened. Would you calm down and think rationally for a second? Rationally? Why the F would I ever do that? Izuku spat, grabbing his wrench and slamming it down into the now thoroughly scrapped machine. The metal creaked and rang like a bell. Because this is a giant chance for you, so swallow your pride and accept. Mirio stomped over towards Izuku, grabbed his shoulder and pushed him to making eye contact. Izuku glared at the offending hand, his nostrils flaring as he took long, deep breaths. The calm before the storm. He grabbed Mirio's arm, grip shaking. All I have left is my pride. You don't know what it's like. Try me. Mirio's laugh was filled with dead humor. We became friends because we both wanted to prove them wrong, right? This is your chance. We're a lot alike. Izuku admitted, his rage not fading. Not for a second. But there's one big F difference between us. When you asked a pro if you could be a hero, they told you if you practiced, if you trained strong that you could become a hero. He told me to give up. That I had no hope of ever becoming a hero. Izuku pulled Mirio's hand off of him, bending it in an awkward way until Mirio broke free using his quirk. I'm not going to accept his charity now. Forever. I worked strong to become who I am. I'm not going to let someone else change that. This is your chance. Izuku, why can't you see that? As your friend I can't let you. Mirio's head recoiled as Izuku's fist struck him across the cheek. The sound of flesh hitting flesh echoed throughout the workshop like thunder. Mirio stumbled backwards 2 steps and looked at Izuku. Physically he was hurt. But the emotional pain was probably far worse. There, friendship over. Now go accept your fate. Izuku grunted, turning towards lump of scrap once again. You'll be better with it than I am. Mirio stood, hand on his cheek, the anger draining from him. Izuku's wrath had been greater. Far greater. Without another word, he left. A silent minute passed in the workshop. Even Mei stopped on her projects. Izuku acted with a purposeful fury, slamming his wrench into the scrap until both objects were left warped beyond repair. He ignored both of them as he made his way into the back. Tears swelling in his eyes as he slammed the door to his office shut. Mei finally came out of her corner and walked over to her. She looked more human than normal, biting her lip and fidgeting. She ran a hand through her thick pink hair and looked in the direction Izuku had left. Is Izuku going to be okay? Momo asked her. Maybe. Mei shrugged. I haven't seen him that mad before. Do you think you can go talk to him? Why me? Not that I mind, but you've known him longer. Maybe. But I'm not really good with people. And he'd probably just say he was fine if I asked him. Mei sighed and let her shoulders slumped. And he'd appreciate it if I cleaned up here. It's not much, but it'll be enough. She bit her tongue and nodded. I'll talk to him. Mei let out a sigh of relief. Thank you. She found Izuku sitting with his back against the wall, head between his knees as he let out a long, slow groan. This wasn't the confident man that she had gotten to know. This was someone damaged. Someone that hated when others saw that damage. She stared at him for a moment, waiting for him to tell her to go away, and to find the right words to say. Her mind was still racing over what had happened minutes ago. You want to talk about it? She asked, leaning forward to smile at Izuku. He brought his head up. A few tears pooled in his eyes, even as he stubbornly refused their existence. He coughed, his voice was harsh and dry. No. He looked at her for a moment before he shrugged and pulled himself up. Not here. Then where? She asked, following him as he made his way out of the office and towards one of the garages. Izuku tore the cover off of something revealing a motorbike, one that was custom-made and would draw the attention of all that saw it with its large front wheel and sleek streamlined dark metallic frame. The smile he gave her wasn't forced, but it was pained. Want to go for a ride? He offered her a helmet, and she blinked at it for a few seconds. You know how to drive? She took the helmet and looked at the bike once again. Is it street legal? Legally. But I'm going to. You can stay here if you want. Izuku half mumbled as he placed his helmet on. A strand of his green hair stuck out in front of his eyes. He pushed it back and got onto the bike. The roar to life. I'm coming. She put the helmet on and joined him. Great, hold on. She barely had enough time to be embarrassed by that statement before Izuku took off, the tires screeching on the smooth concrete and the scent of burning RBB joined with the usual scent of industry that permeated the workshop. The city flew by them as Izuku took to the highway, expertly navigating the traffic as he was probably going just a bit over the speed limit. They merged into a residential area, Izuku's bike still roaring through the narrow streets, but without the excessive speed he had shown on the highway. The buildings came to a stop, giving way to trees and nature. Just one of the many pocket forests located in the city. But this one had a purpose. Muzudafu Cemetery. Izuku got off his bike, leaving the helmet there and walked forward. His expression was dark. Momo stared at the sign for a few moments before joining Izuku, following after him in respectful silence. Who had Izuku lost? What did it have to do with his anger? They stopped at a single grave. It was like any other. Made of stone, small, the names of the deceased carved into its surface. Inko and Hisashi Midoriya. Izuku sniffed, staring at the grave and wiped his nose. It's been a while. Should have brought them flowers. This was the grave of Izuku's parents. Momo bit her lip and activated her quirk, creating a single rose out of glass and presented it towards Izuku. Will this do? Yeah. He smiled, taking the delicate flower and placing it on the grave. Thanks. Momo folded her hands and stood beside Izuku while he kneeled in front of the grave. Loss was something she wasn't familiar with. But it explained a lot about Izuku. Why he was so reliable, why he was so self-sufficient. It felt hollow to praise his maturity now that she knew. I was 10 when they were killed. Izuku said softly, his voice cracking. We were on a family trip because my dad was back from work. A villain started rampaging and killed my parents. All Might showed up. He saved me. I know I should be thankful that he saved my life. He laughed, still touching the grave. And no, I don't blame him for my parents' deaths. He tried to save them. He really did. I remember the despair on his face when he listened to my mom's heartbeat. We spoke afterwards. He apologized a lot for not being able to save my parents. So what happened between the two of you? She asked. Her voice was barely louder than the rustling of the trees nearby. Something stupid. Izuku stood and dusted himself off. His anger was still there, but it was once more contained by his usual coolness. I asked him if I could become a hero. He gave the generic response, you know, the usual, if you train strong with your quirk you can be a hero too kind of thing. Then I asked him if I could become a hero even if I was quirkless. He said to give up. That I wouldn't be able to be a hero without a quirk. That he was sorry. That I should become a cop or a firefighter if I wanted to help people. That was when I started to hate him. Izuku groaned and scratched his head, turmoil still written on his face. I started living my life in defiance of that. I studied harder, worked harder, and got into with that as a core of who I am. But that's not all you are now, is it? She asked, placing a hand on his arm. You've proven yourself, to everybody, the teachers respect you, and you haven't even graduated yet, Izuku. You've done so much and I've seen you smile. His hand fell on top of hers. It's not all I am now. But it's still there. And what happened today? Izuku laughed and took a step away from her. He bit his lip and shook his head. I really should tell you. Tell the whole world. But I'm not going to mess things up for Mirio. Didn't you punch him and say friendship over? He'll get over it. Izuku shrugged like it was no big deal. Serious, why is it that guys became better friends after a fight? But really, basically All Might changed his mind and offered me a chance to become a hero. You didn't accept, did you? He snorted. I told him to piss us off and that he was 8 years too late for that offer and to shove it up his gigantic butt. Well, pretty much, there was more swearing involved. I don't want or need his help. Besides, being a hero isn't my dream anymore. Oh, she said softly, standing beside him and smiling at him. He seemed better already. That was good. And she understood him a bit better now. That was also good. Well, what's your dream now? Izuku shrugged and looked at his hands. I don't really know. Maybe to shape the future with my own hands or something like that. I don't really need a dream to keep moving forward. But hey, being a giant emotional BS makes me hungry. Want to go get something to eat? Sure, what did you have in mind? I'm feeling something meaty. Have you ever eaten a hamburger before? Because I know a great place. Seriously, is that all you got? Momo paused, debating on whether or not she should actually needed to see Izuku before she joined the others on the bus. She did come a full hour early just to talk to him before she was supposed to. Not even Izuwasen or the buses were here yet. Besides, it wasn't like she needed to talk to him, it was more just checking in. Hey, don't complain to me, you're the one that went and screwed with your quirk. Now get back into that wall, or so help me I'll put you in there myself. And he sounded busy. Maybe I should just. The door to the gym burst open, revealing a sweaty, annoyed, red-faced Izuku. The cold air blasted her as she stood in the summer heat. He was wearing his workout attire, only instead of his usual sweats he had on a pair of shorts that showed off that he did not miss leg day. Momo, the doors are glass, I can see you, get in here. Right, she squeaked, her heart nearly flying out of her sissy as Izuku escorted her into the back of the gym, where Mirio was dressed in the workout attire she made for him, and trying to phase through a wall. Wasn't he like really good at that already? Did something happen to Mirio? She asked, looking between the two of them. Just going through a quirk evolution. Mirio half laughed, trying to pull his arm out of the wall. He did so, but instead ended up pulling a chunk of it out. Similar holes decorated the surrounding walls. CRP. The dumbass accepted All Might's quirk, so now he has all of All Might's power and it's messing with his control. Seriously, he can't even throw a punch now without breaking anything. Izuku popped open his water bottle and half mumbled his statement. But the message was clear. Izuku, that's private, you can't go around telling people that. Momo, I trust you, but please forget what you just heard. Mirio panicked, flailing his arms and sending the wall debris flying. A new hole appeared in the ceiling. I think we should move to somewhere less expensive to break. I have a published thesis on your quirk that's been in a case study for at least 3 research teams on Island. I'm going to have a strong time explaining why you, a perfectly healthy, normal and relatively normal hero in training, suddenly has the ability to punch through a mountain. Izuku sneered, pushing back his hair. Couldn't he already punch through a mountain? She asked, trying to make them smile. The two were still friends, but clearly Izuku was really annoyed by everything that had happened. It was like someone came along and messed with his favorite toys. Izuku groaned. I meant like, make the mountain not there. I see. And he can do that because All Might gave him his quirk. She raised an eyebrow, looking around and not seeing the number 1 hero. Is All Might dead? No, he's just a SHT teacher, so I kicked him out and took over for Mirio. Izuku took fingers and formed a V just above his head, imitating All Might's signature hairstyle. That wasn't a problem for me, I just took to the quirk naturally. It must be a problem with your quirk. I know, why don't you try squeezing your butt cheeks? Seriously, that's what he said. I helped Mirio train his quirk the first time, I'll help him unfuck this. You're the one that told me to accept it, I just like complaining, it helps me think. Yep, she shouldn't have bothered. All this was making her feel like she was taking crazy pills. Actually, she felt like that ever since she met Izuku. It was probably the fact that things tended to be just that much more extra around him, that all this felt ever so slightly sane. She looked up at the new hole in the ceiling Mirio had made minutes ago. Perhaps you two should take this to a location that's less expensive to damage. She laughed, pointing up at the exposed wiring. Maybe one of the big empty gyms, like Gamma or Delta. Izuku looked up and squinted. Damn it, that's going to be a pain. At least you missed the sprinkler system. Alright Mirio, squeeze those butt cheeks and go wild. We can call a destroyed building a training accident due to All Might's lack of supervision. What? No, I'm not going to destroy a whole building just to cover up a few holes. Mirio crossed arms, or at least tried to, as one of his arms phased through the other. Relax, I was joking. I thought we agreed you weren't allowed to do that because you always sound sarcastic? I was being sarcastic when I agreed to stop. Why were these two friends again? Well, I should get going. I think Aizawa wanted us to meet up at the bus early. She tried to sneak away, but Izuku's hand on the collar of her shirt told her otherwise. Hold up a second. Curse Izuku and his ability to literally pick her up with one arm. Maybe even half an arm. Did you really come all this way to say you were leaving for the training camp? Well, she also just kind of wanted to see him. Even if it was only for a few days, she was already missing Izuku. Probably because she had been his favorite test subject for the past month or so. And he made the best food. I also wanted to know if you had any advice for what I should focus on. A smile cracked on his face. She should have just been honest. He tapped his chin, assuming his usual thinking pose, and began to hum in delight. It was a bit like the purring of a cat, only instead of calming or soothing, it was much more terrifying. Well, let's see, they'll probably be having you do something basic like trying to make a bunch of stuff to increase your reserves, or increase your speed, both of which would be fine, but ultimately those won't improve your real strength. I say you should try to increase the number of different objects you can create at once. You're currently only able to do one complex item and 3 basic compounds at a time. So increasing that would be great. Oh, so pretty much what I've been doing with you. Minus the physical training, the endless tech lectures, and the mad cackling as they tried to make some new babies. Support items. They were support items. Mei was not rubbing off on her. She was basically going on vacation. Yep, just remember Momo, your biggest strength is... He tapped on her forehead. In there. Planning and being prepared will do so much more than trying to react to something. She was still blushing by the time she got on the bus. Doubly so when Kyoka asked her what was with that dopey smile. XXXX, the training camp had gone well, and she was starting to wonder if Izuku's sadistic nature was commonplace in UH for training or if he just learned it from Aizawa-sensei. Really, Shoto spent either half his time sitting in boiling or freezing water. And at least 5 students had spent most of their time punch rocks, or in Kirishima's case getting punched. Most of them had scars, or in Uraraka's case puked for at least an hour or 2. It was sadistic, but it probably would have been worse if Izuku was here. Mostly because Aizawa-sensei just nodded at her and trusted her, or rather Izuku's training regime. It really was a vacation as she spent much of her time trying to create 2 different complex objects at once. And by complex she started with something simple, a sword and shield. At first they came out as fusions from each other, then by the end of the second day, she had a dull sword and a sharp shield. And now, on the 3rd night, she was wandering through the forest with Kyoka, with Class 1B trying to scare them. Sheesh, you hardly seemed fazed by the training, Momo. Just what have you been up to after school? Kyoka mumbled as they made their way past Class 1B's failed attempts of scaring them. It was just kind of strong to be scared by things like that. Yeah, I've been working strong after school. Actually, pretty much every free hour has been spent trying to better herself in some way or another. His training makes this stuff look like a walk in the park. The support devil, right? Kyoka mumbled, her ear jacks fidgeting as they walked. What's heat? They both stopped. The faint scent of smoke, combined with a low purple haze barely seen in the dim light. A scream tore through the forest, followed by more. From up ahead, that green vine-haired girl from Class 1B fell over, followed by her panicking classmate. This wasn't part of the trial of courage. Kyoka, she grabbed girl, forcing a gas mask onto her as she formed one over her face. She made 2 gas masks in an instant, barely even sparing a thought, and pushed them into Kyoka's arms. I think we're under attack. Give these to those 2, I'll make more, right? Kyoka ran forward. How many did she need? 20. There were 40 students. How many of them were in trouble? How many could she try to save? Those around her. Give each of them 2, don't overburden them. With a stack of teen gas masks at the ready, she tore off her shirt. Momo? Kyoka asked, the silver-haired boy with the steel quirk from Class 1B following after her, his classmate in his arms. Why did you? I needed a bigger surface for these. She half mumbled as she began going over the details of the construct in her mind. With her hands on the ground, she took a breath. A buzzing erupted from her back as the first bits of the drone emerged. It zoomed upwards, stopping 20 feet up thanks to the receiver in her arms. 3 more followed suit and she felt herself go a bit woozy. She really needed to thank Izuku once she got back. Since when could you do that? Kyoka muttered. Whoa, that's kind of amazing. Tetsu explained. Praise later, information first. She breathed and made the tricky part next. The display for the drones. A screen appeared on her arm and she placed it down onto the ground. It wasn't very large, barely wider and taller than most cell phones. Just big enough to see what the drones saw. We're under attack. She said again, it looks like there's a lot of fighting back at the clearing. And more in other places. The fog is spiraling a central point up back a bit. That's where Itsuka is. Testu didn't even hesitate to grab 3 of the masks and started off in that direction. What should we do? Kyoka asked, staring off after him. Momo bit her lip. She technically wasn't allowed to use her quirk to fight the villains. But then again she was already doing it. And maybe Izuku was rubbing off on her. Shoto and Katsuki are fighting someone way into the forest, and it looks like Dark Shadow has gone wild. Damn it. We need to stop this gas first. I think I have a visual on the villain making gas. I'm going to take him out. What should I do? She just smiled. Stand back. I'm not used to making these just yet. She took a breath. Recalled the design. There was no need to partially make it, especially if she wanted to be able to move fast later. It emerged from her shoulder, a sleek metallic frame that synced up nicely with the drones. When it burst from her skin she felt woozy. She might have overdone it today. With a single breath she began to aim it. Momo? Kyoka asked, slowly pointing at her newest weapon. Is that a rocket launcher? Technically it's a motor, but yeah. She said 2 seconds before firing it. There was a thump, followed by a whoosh as the motor made its way into the air and followed a long arc towards the villain. A moment later it crashed down next to him, covering him a thick sticky compound that pinned him to the ground and illuminated the area. There, now the others should be able to. Kyoka screamed but was cut off. Momo turned to see a gloved hand extending towards her. Black and white mask. Orange coat. Well, looks like I found a payday. The world went black. Compress, what's the deal? Why did you bring these 2 along? Darkness and pain pawed at her awareness, trying to pull her back into the slumber she had been in. She didn't remember much. It was only the fresh memories of what had happened to her that sprung her into an awakeness. Her hands and legs were bound behind her back, her mouth gagged, and she was on the ground. Light flooded in from a nearby room, and several figures loomed over her. She recognized one of them. That frightening man that wore hands like clothing, the one that had attacked her class months ago, stood next to the same orange-wearing masked man that had captured her. 2 others stood nearby, a gecko-looking man, and someone wearing a suit of black and white. Yeah man, it's one thing to kidnap girls for no reason. I don't think they're going to join us. The lizard said. Ah, come on Spinner, look at them, they're so cute. Don't tell Togai said that, the black and white man said. Hey Shigaraki, can we have some fun with them? She sucked in her breath at the implications of that. She needed to think of a way to escape, but doing so while they were watching might not be the best idea. Besides, Kyoko was here too, and she was still unconscious. First things first, she needed to let others know where they were. Stay away from the long-haired one. The orange-wearing man said softly. He was looking at her. She could all but feel his smile. She's our payday? Explain. Shigaraki growled, scratching his neck in annoyance. Why did you bring her? She's the daughter of the Yaoyorozu family. They're worth billions. Keep her unharmed and we can make a nice little ransom for her. He pointed towards Kyoka. That one I just grabbed because she was in the way. Feel free to have fun with her, especially if the Yaoyorozu doesn't comply. Oh goody, we can have a tea party later. Twice. Make a clone to watch them. I want all of you out there when we deal with our newest recruit. Shigaraki turned from the room, dragging the others with him. Twice, the one in the suit seemed to split, played rock paper scissors with himself before one headed out of the room. Oh hey, you're awake? The duplicate said, scooting closer to her. Sorry about all this. Hey, do you want pizza? I want pizza. Hey, can we get a pizza? Twice. Shut the F up, someone growled from the other room. It sounded exactly like Twice. Apparently, she was being watched by an insane villain. Lovely. But yeah, pizza sounds great, ignore them, focus on escaping. First thing first. Signal for help. What was that signal again? 232, 5 Hz. It took her more time than normal to make the transmitter in her scalp so that the antenna would blend in with her hair. With any luck, Izuku would be watching. He could tell the police and other pros where she was. But she also couldn't just rely on them. Straining to look over at Kyoka, she inspected the girl. She didn't look damaged, so why was she was faking it? Kyoka's ear jack was slowly working at her bindings. Clever. Now for her own bindings, they felt like they were made of cloth, or some kind of rope. The problem was that she needed exposed skin to use her quirk. And too much movement might alert their guard. Wait, he seemed nice, or at least confused. Maybe she could. She began to wiggle and made a few muffled words to him. Somehow through his mask he raised an eyebrow. What's that? You're not comfortable, too bad, here let me help you up. He was gentler than she thought he would be, assisting her just enough so that she was sitting up. Hands still behind her back. Is that better? 'Cause I can make it worse, she nodded, letting her gratitude show in her face, even as she began to work on an acid that would dissolve the bindings. It would burn her flesh, but it was better than just sitting around and waiting for help. It might even be too late. Okay, so the plan. She needed a plan. This was the same group that attacked you a few months ago. But with new members. It was safe to assume that portal guy was still with them. And that there might even be some Nomu waiting at his call. She'd have to disable him first. If she remembered correctly, they said that the collar around his neck was important. Her first goal should be to disable him. Physical attacks probably wouldn't do much good. Electric. It was her best bet. Then there were the others. Their leader could destroy what he touched. He was also dangerous. Long range would be the best. Spinner carried a sword, but his quirk was unknown. Still, though, the one that worried her the most was the man that had captured her. Compress. She didn't even know what his quirk was. Probably something to do with his name. Could he shrink items down and carry them? That would explain what happened to her and Kyoka. And Twice could duplicate himself, probably others as well. It sounded like there were more too. Was there another way out? If there was, it'd be better to run than fight. She needed to think about her own safety and Kyoka's. No, there was no other exit in the room. It was made of brick and had a bunch of cases of alcohol and other drinks laying about. All right. Plan. Once freed, knock out this Twice, disable portal guy, deploy smoke screen and try to find a way out. Twice shouted, moving over towards Kyoka. OSHT, did she get caught? Do you think she'd look good in a dress? Nah, she's a rocker, oh that's right. A rock dress, yeah right, crazy. You can shove your offer and go to hell, that was Katsuki's voice. Great, now she had to free him. Wait, he was a good fighter. Freeing him would make things a lot easier. That was good. But did they also capture anyone else? It didn't sound like it. Maybe Compress had a limit to the number or time. That was why she was here, wasn't it? Did they say they were going to free him? That was probably a dumb thing to do. Guess they didn't know him very well. Her bindings were all but gone. If she wanted, it would be easy to force them apart. But she needed to wait for her. A pounding came from a metal door from the other room. Someone order a pizza? That was Izuku's voice. Twice, someone growled from outside. I said no pizza. What, I didn't do it, I swear, both Twice said. Hey, don't be like that, man, it's got extra cheese, thick crust, pepperoni, and Kyoka. Now Kyoka's ear jack started for Twice's neck. He dissolved into a pile of goo with the first attack while she lunged forward, bursting out from her bindings. Short-range tasers burst from her knuckles as she darted into the main room. Finding the portal guy. An extra large portion of up, the door burst open and Izuku charged in, clad in what looked like a suit of full tactical combat gear. But he still didn't have any sleeves on. In each hand he had a large cannon-like gun that immediately went to work. A large blast followed by a splat, and one villain in blue clothes with burn marks along his body was knocked onto the wall, covered in an expanding white goo that looked like a giant spit wad. With both knuckles pulsing more than enough electricity to knock a man out, Momo jabbed them into the portal man's collar. The effect was instant. His body shook for a second before he collapsed down onto the ground, A vaguely wavering black line. That was 2 down, how many more? Izuku grabbed a small blonde girl with one arm and tossed her up, shooting her with his other cannon and sticking her to the ceiling. Was he really firing giant spit wads at people? He tossed the cannon to the side and grabbed his wrench he had on his back, just in time to intercept an attack from Spinner. Sharp blades met blunt object. But Izuku was stronger and better. Spinner's end came with a boot to the DC that sent him all the way across the room into compress. Deku, what the F are you? Katsuki shouted, still stuck in his chair. He was cut short when Izuku ran past him, moving to swing his wrench towards the leader. It was then that she got a good look at Izuku's face. He was smiling with a cold, calculated feeling that came from a well-thought plan of ruining someone's day succeeding better than he could have hoped. Shigaraki, right. I still need to pay you back for F up my door, and leaving the complete mess I had to fix that you F. Who the F are you? Shigaraki spat back. He was faster than he looked, dodging Izuku's wrench swing if only barely. His hand moving onto the handle. The destruction began and the wrench snapped under its own weight. Are you a hero? Hero? Izuku smiled, tossing his helmet to the side and dropping into his fighting style. The brutal one that turned every part of his body into a weapon. Nah, I'm just the support. Izuku's advantage in terms of everything was known in the first blow. He was faster, stronger, and had better reach. But Shigaraki had his quirk. Izuku's first blow was to his head, sending a severed hand flying. His second attack was grabbing Shigaraki's arm and twisted it behind his back. His third was another blow to the stomach. Shigaraki retaliated, grabbing onto Izuku's hand. Let go of me or you'll lose your. Izuku's response was to slam his head into the wall, leaving a splatter of BLD. Let go of me or lose your head. Another slam and more BLD appeared on the wall. And again. And again. Before Shigaraki's hand fell off of Izuku's arm. A large red mark of exposed muscle bled on his arm where Shigaraki's quirk had started to work. Izuku stood over his victory, teeth heaving with each breath, eyes scanning the room. Somehow this quirkless man had just defeated a whole group of villains. Sure, technically she helped with one and Kyoka helped with twice, but still that was 5 villains in a matter of seconds. Holy V. Kyoka muttered from beside her. I think your boyfriend just killed that guy for you. It was kind of hot. She really didn't know if she could argue anything about that statement. Izuku looked down and nudged Shigaraki with his foot. Suchti, I think I actually did kill him. That's going to be fun to explain when the police show up. Hey Momo, can I get some bandages and medical supplies over here? I'm kind of bleeding a lot. She jumped and blinked before heading over towards Izuku, bandages pouring out of her arms and a bottle of disinfectant in her hands. Thanks for showing up, but shouldn't you have called the police? Izuku winced as she began to treat his wound. Hey, easy, that's literally just my muscles there. It's sensitive. And I told them where the signal was coming from. After I had already decided that I was going to show up and rescue you myself. Of course you did. But you didn't think to wear sleeves. Sleeves would have been really useful fighting against that guy. Honestly, I forgot about sleeves. I was more worried about having something that could counter all the quirks I knew about. And what was your counter for someone that can destroy whatever he touches? What better way to fight something that destroys everything than with something that can create anything? That had her blushing. A voice from above them. It was the blonde-haired girl. She was blushing and looked way too happy. You two are so cute together, you should embrace. I mean, you two can make out later. Kyoka began to release Katsuki from his chair. But shouldn't we get out of here? Katsuki stood the second he was free. You didn't save me, Deku. You got that I didn't save you? Izuku repeated, pointing his free hand at Momo. I saved her, you were just a casualty? That only made Katsuki madder. A moment later and someone appeared from the door, a man wearing a ninja mask. The pro-hero edge shot and following after him was All Might. And he did not look pleased. Young Midoriya, would you please explain to me what you are? All Might's anger was cut short as an explosion shook the ground, followed by static on the pro-hero's earpieces. All Might's face fell and his entire body began to shake. No. Why don't we have this talk later, All Might? Izuku waved him off easily. Sounds like you need to go save the world from something more dangerous than a quirkless kid. All Might didn't even use a door. Lightning cracks over the desolate shores of a blackened beach, illuminating the lone tree on the cliff tops, its bark stripped, its branches bare save for the lone white flower that bloomed in defiance of it all. A single ray of hope in utter darkness. Power, the word came in with the dull roar of thunder. A guitar riff chasing after it like a fox would a mouse. Power, the drums began, their percussions matching the waves that brought with them the tides of change. With the bass set, the real music began. Strong, heavy, and metal. The scene changed from that desolate shore to the ruined cityscape the world recognized. All Might stood, barely standing against the nameless masked man that had nearly beaten him. The music was swallowed by the dread of the scene until its silence nearly won. Only the lone bass could be heard over the wind. Pow! The sound exploded and the song began again. The shred of a guitar matched perfectly with a blond shirtless man jumping out from nowhere. He only wore a pair of simple blue pants. He ran with speed that was beyond human, kicking up dirt and walking through walls with ease. Pow! The blond man shouted and punched the masked man in the suit, slamming him with full force. He vanished, going into the ground like it was not even there. Power! Another blow, matching the beat of the drums. Power! Power! Pow! Please, Mirio shouted, trying to grab Izuku's phone away from him. He was bandaged head to toe, and his face was beyond crimson. He had been in the hospital for nearly a week at this point. Turn it off, I can't take it anymore. Nijire pouted from her seat on Mirio's hospital bed. We were just getting to the good part. Izuku laughed and pulled his phone just out of Mirio's reach. What's the matter, Mirio? You're internet famous. The son of All Might and his scream of power are basically the most popular meme at this point. There's even a rap version of it. Nijire perked up. Ooh, send that one to me, I need a new ringtone. Nijire, Mirio shouted. Me too. Tamaki, the third member of the big three she had only seen twice, raised his hand from his seat next to the bed. Tamaki, you too? Mirio whined, flailing his fully bandaged arm. Momo rolled her eyes and smiled, placing a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Did you really want to come here just to tease Mirio? Yeah, Izuku snorted and then winked at her. You think I was going to miss the chance to embarrass him like this? And I just love how he's now the son of All Might. It's honestly great. What about you? Mirio's embarrassment faded when he looked at Izuku. I thought you'd be in the court still. Yeah, considering how you killed a guy, I thought you'd be in jail or worse. Expelled. Nijire clapped her cheeks and made a shocked face. Izuku lifted up his leg and pulled on his breathe leg to show off his ankle bracelet like it was some trophy or badge of honor. I'm under house arrest for a bunch of legal reasons that basically say I'm amazing, but never do that again, you dumbass. I got off easy thanks to the lawyers Momo's parents got me. Yes, her mother had taken an instant liking to Izuku. So did her father. They both kept asking when she was going to bring Izuku over again. And when was she going to start dating him? Which was a fair question. They were just showing their gratitude for saving us. Maybe, but you did great too. Now I just can't leave campus until a graduate. Izuku shrugged and pulled his leg back down. Which means I won't be able to go to my favorite places to eat, but the real worst part is that Nizu decided that I had to attend a bunch of seminars while he said that he was proud of me. Not much of a punishment since you live on campus anyways. Nijire crossed her arms. And recovery girl even healed your arm. I can't even take Mirio to the beach until like August. Oh, don't worry, we'll all be living on campus soon. Izuku chuckled to himself. There was a staff meeting. They decided that we were going to have dorms. Izuku leaned back into his chair and smiled at them, one finger over his mouth. Don't tell anyone though. The teachers are going to be heading out to talk to parents later. XXXX, alright, keep it slow, nice and steady, don't rush it. Izuku paced behind her. She could feel her eyes on her back as she held her hands out in front of her. A few broken bits sat on glass trays for clear viewing in a microscope. Originally, Mei was there helping them, but she got bored an hour ago. It's not the most complicated thing you've made, it's just really small. Momo felt herself twitch as yet another failed microbot fell out of her hand. Not only were they doing this on the hottest day of the year, but Izuku was being more annoying than usual. Well, not really. He was being the same amount of annoying as always. And that was part of the problem. He'd leave to do something for 10 minutes, then come back and check on her progress and give the same useless advice. She could make small things, but often they weren't very complex. The amount of precision details needed for one microbot was staggering. Each one was twice as complicated as the drones she could make, and the slightest flaw could completely ruin one. Bits of the bot fell out of her hands, crashing down into the tray. More failures. A sigh ran through her body and she let her shoulders slumped. Only to tense up the second Izuku touched her shoulder. Ever since he had said she was attractive, the thought of him kissing her was constantly in the back of her mind. And Kyoka's boyfriend comment didn't exactly help things either. That feeling of happiness when she heard Izuku's voice, when she saw him burst through the door, was still on her mind. She had feelings for Izuku, the romantic kind, but those were often mixed with the usual frustration he caused in her life and her admiration. But watching him dismantle 5 villains in a matter of seconds, Kyoka said it best. It was the hottest thing she'd ever seen. But that had been 2 weeks ago. She had been with Izuku nearly every day since. And he hasn't tried anything. He was just doing his usual self, like he was attracted to her, even though she knew that he was. So why wasn't he asking her out or something? That one looks worse than before. Izuku commented, shaking the small glass dish. The bots were just large enough that they could maybe be seen, but still smaller than most bugs. We're doing something else. She stood and stared up at him. Her CZ was pressed into his for a moment before he backed away, standing straight. Once again, their height difference was more than a little apparent. The scar from his fight with the villains was still there, the flesh ever so slightly pink. Oh, Izuku blinked, backing up just a hair, his green eyes sparkling with mirth and amusement. Are you giving up? No, it's just frustrating having you constantly hovering over me, just waiting to tell me how I messed up. Hey, you're the one that wants my advice. If you wanted to work on this alone, you can go somewhere other than my workshop. The tools I need are here, you know what. Let's go spar. I want to punch you. That's if I let you hit me. You've gotten a lot better, but you still have a long way to go. I just have one question. What? Shut up and embrace me. It was probably a mix of frustration, her growing attraction towards Izuku, and her appreciation of him that led her to jump on him. Her arms were around his neck, one hand fingers deep into his hair, while her legs managed to wrap around his teeth, and her lips pressed so purposefully against his. Izuku's reactions were without pause. He caught her, grabbing her somewhere between her butt and thighs, his fingers digging deep. He kissed her back, pressing against her with a purpose that matched her own. They both wanted to know if something was there, to find if the sparks that flew between them could mean something more. Something much more. The answer was without a doubt. Their embrace parted, and she was met with Izuku's green eyes and a giant smile on his face. For a moment they didn't say anything until they both laughed. Her hand falling to cover her mouth while she felt her face growing hot. Izuku still held her, and she didn't mind at all. I've never kissed a boy before. She bit her lip, smiling. It was nice. First time for me too. I think I might be addicted to it. Izuku said with the kind of cheesy grin that barely worked with a line that's smooth. And it had her heart fluttering. I doubt that. You had to have had a girlfriend before. She teased, fingers still in his hair. He shook his head. Nope, when I was young, most girls avoided me because I was bullied. Now most girls are scared of me. Only you, Nijire, and now Kyoka talk to me regularly. And Mei. Oh, right, her too. So, she said slowly. Why did I have to be the one to embrace you? He kissed her a second time. Barely a peck that had her blushing. Because I'm a sadistic butt and I wanted you to make the first move. She swatted him, trying not to laugh. You jerk, you could have just been honest. Hey, don't call your boyfriend a jerk. That had her blushing up a storm. What? Boyfriend? Since when are you my boyfriend? Since you became my girlfriend. He laughed, kissing her on the neck. A shock went through her entire body and she felt hot at that, and she became very aware of his hands and the feeling of his fingers through the fabric of her shorts. And who says I'm your girlfriend? She barely managed to say otherwise as he placed another embrace on her neck. Then she, me. There was a hunger in his voice that she couldn't quite place. And he kissed her again. This time she didn't let him back away. It felt like her heart was going to explode, and he was right, she might just end up addicted to his kisses. They came to a stop to see Mei standing near the door, her face covered by black soot as she took a sip from her drink. Is this going to be a regular thing? Yep, Izuku boasted. And she became aware that death by embarrassment was a very strong possibility. So, is there a reason why your room has less space in it than the inside of my robots? Izuku squeezed into her door frame and took half a step into her room. Even with no one inside, it looked cramped. Far too cramped. But with someone of Izuku's size and bulk, it looked claustrophobic. Momo bit her lip, a blush filling her cheeks as her boyfriend examined her dorm room. It was the first time she had had a boy in her room, but that really didn't mean a whole lot. She had been alone and unsupervised with Izuku many times since they started being NTMT. Though, technically he was the supervisor at those times. It had been a good month. I thought I'd have more room. It's smaller than my closet back home. She muttered, warm BLD rising to fill her cheeks. Izuku raised an eyebrow in her general direction before turning and falling onto her bed like he belonged there. It was probably the only spot in her room large enough for him. She could barely squeeze into her desk chair. Well, at least your bed is comfortable. It should. It's always been. She took one step too close to her bed and Izuku grabbed her. She screamed as she found herself half on top of him, a hot, steaming look being sent her way, making her inside squirm. It's better with you in it though. He cupped her cheek and smoldered at her. She covered her face with her hands, failing to hide her blush while hoping that no one would look in through her open door. Izuku was not afraid of public displays of affection if it meant embarrassing her. We shouldn't be. He stole her breath away by flipping around and pinning her against the bed, her hands now above her head and Izuku on top of her, with that oh-so-stuffed smile on his face. Her legs were all but around his waist. There's so much room for activities. He ran a hand down her face and along her bed, showing just how large it was. His lips touched her neck and she felt so many parts of her body just melt under him. They moved up her jaw and finally reached her embrace. She never got tired of kissing him, of how it would make everything around them vanish, if only for just a moment. Activities, ones that involve a lot less clothing, section. He was talking about section. Somehow, she had been expecting to talk about it with Izuku further down the line, but that didn't mean she hadn't been thinking about it. Especially when Izuku pulled his shirt up, wiping his brow off and showing off his abs. It wasn't her fault his muscles were incredibly hot. Isn't it rushing things? She weakly muttered, fluttering her eyes. Part of her didn't care, but most of her was vaguely aware of the still open door. That would need to be fixed if they ever were to do anything. You're not saying no. Izuku's grunt as she kissed him on his neck reverberated through her entire body and made her clothing seem just the slightest bit optional. If anything, I think you're encouraging me. What if I am? She teased, half covering her mouth and smiling up at him. There was a very good chance that Izuku had corrupted her. A knock came from the door and they both turned to see a red-faced Kyoka standing there, her earjacks pointing down the stairs as she twiddled her thumbs. Not to ruin the mood or anything, but Izuwa-sensei is coming up, so yeah. Izuku rolled off of her and slammed his knee into the dresser, while she did her best to correct the damage he had done to her properness. Thank you, Kyoka. Sorry if you saw too much. Momo pulled her hair up into a ponytail and moved to greet her friend. Kyoka's face went red again and her earjacks began to mirror her thumbs. Oh, don't worry you two basically saved my life, so it's the least I can do. Besides, we're friends, right? Absolutely, Izuku said loudly and walked behind Kyoka. He patted her on the back, sneaking a glance down the hallway. But don't sell yourself short, you did great too. I'm sure even if I hadn't shown up, you and Momo could have gotten out alive. And saved Kaken too, or you could have left him. Her face turned even redder. Thanks, but I mean, I was just hoping Momo had a plan or something. She seems so much more grounded since she met you. Oh, I have an idea, Kyoka. She smiled, walking over to the girl and grabbed her hands. Why don't you start joining me and Izuku for training? I'm sure that he could have a few new ideas for you as well. Oh, I wouldn't want to impose or anything, and I'm not really sure I'd be able to keep up or anything like that. Kyoka stepped back shaking her hands while her earjacks made an X in front of her face. Izuku just smiled. Well, if you do decide to join us, just be warned, I will push you so strong that your earjacks will be made of diamonds. Noted, she squeaked. Well, I need to get back to, setting up my room and stuff, so, see. Kyoka darted down the hall and slammed the door to her room 2 doors over. Izuku just sighed. You know, I'm starting to wonder if she really is afraid of me. That was really weird. Momo nodded in agreement. Kyoka wasn't afraid of Izuku, but maybe it had something to do with the two of them making out. If she saw 2 friends making out, she'd probably be a bit weirded out by it. Maybe we should make sure we're somewhere private when we're doing that kind of thing. Good idea. Want to come to my room? There was the slightest growl in his voice that had her knees weak. In the 3H dorms. Isn't that just as bad? She bit her lip, still considering everything that had happened. It didn't feel like they were rushing. They were teenagers anyway, it was only natural to be curious. Dorms. I guess I do technically have one of those, but it's empty. No, I have my own place. I've been living at U8 for years now. Did I never show you? Izuku asked, wrapping his arm around her shoulders and pressing an embrace to her forehead. Wasn't Izuwasen-C coming up? She wiggled out of his arms and started walking down. It's some cot in the workshop, isn't it? No, but your bed is bigger. He followed after her. Come on, I'll show you. They crossed paths with Aizawa on their way down. Ah, Izuku, he said slowly. If Aizawa cared that she was in a relationship or even knew about it, he didn't show it in the slightest. Though he had started to treat her with more, was respect the right word for it? Nizu's looking for you, it sounded important? Izuku groaned, scratching the back of his neck and stretched so that his sleeveless muscles flexed slightly. Really? Did he say what for? You know how he is. He likes to laugh about some secret plan like he's a mad genius when really all he did was make the coffee slightly differently. Aizawa groaned. He did say it was important, so I'll find him later. I was about to go training with Momo. Aizawa just nodded and continued up the stairs. Training? She asked, continuing their walk. Is that what we're doing? Well, you're going to end up hot, tired and sweaty, so in a way, yeah. She prayed that nobody heard him say that. Apparently the support devil had a perverted side that she had accidentally unchained. XXXX Izuku's room was located in the very same workshop she had spent much of her time in. The building was large enough that she had never had the thought to explore the entire thing. Structurally, the room rested on top of one of the garages and restroom. It was one large open space with furniture, couches, bookshelves, closets, tables serving as boundaries and markers for separate areas of the space. The only lone exception was a single open door near the kitchen that looked like a bathroom. The air wasn't exactly nice, and it didn't have that lived-in feel, but in a way it was very Izuku-esque. Her eyes fell on his bed and couch. So, why do you have your own place? She looked back over at Izuku, blinking at him. Such a shame that he didn't have a private bath. It would have been nice to relax while he held her in the hot water. It felt great to let her inner pervert run wild. I kind of moved in and built this place once I got accepted. I was actually supposed to stay with Nizu, but at the time it just felt strange living with someone. Even someone like him. Izuku scratched the back of his head and made his way over to his bed. By the time the first term started, he found out and allowed me to stay here, provided I didn't let my grades slip and attended every class. You built this when you were 15. She allowed her mouth to drop. Like the walls and the floor? It was rougher at first, sheet metal walls, holes everywhere, but it was home. I made it better last year and now here we are. He made his way over to his bed and sat down, staring at her with that challenging look he had. And she was more than willing to take that bait. There was something amazing about the way her relationship with Izuku worked. He didn't ask, didn't command, he just left the door open for her. His way of taking the initiative was to let her take the initiative. But once she made the first move, and he was certain it was what she wanted, he would match her move for move. She strutted over to him, pulling her hair loose and undoing the top button of her shirt. Then the second, then the third, then the fourth. The black BR she had worn that day was exposed to him by the time she reached him. She placed one hand on his shoulder and guided him down onto his bed. They kissed, slowly and with purpose, enjoying the complete and utter privacy of Izuku's room. It was nice. Why didn't you tell me about this place before? She asked, rolling with him as she found his warm green eyes searing her clothes away. His leg pressed between her thighs as his thick muscular arm distorted the bed near her head. This was it. She was going to have section. They were going to have section. We could have done this sooner. Didn't want to rush you. Izuku muttered, kissing her again, his hands. They were hem. They both came to an abrupt and sudden stop, the heat of their passion freezing in an instant. Standing at the side of Izuku's bed, staring at them a mere minute away from stripping each other's clothes off and having AC until she passed out and couldn't walk right the next day, was white-furred, mouse-headed, Principal Nizu. I'd hate to interrupt your canoodling, Izuku, but I really do need to speak to you urgently. He raised his four-fingered paw and waved at her. Ms. Yaoyorozu, I'm pleased you're able to have such relationships even after your capture, but please don't let them interfere with your training. You've made some excellent strides so far. And I owe it to you for breaking Izuku out of his shell. Thanks. Shouldn't the principal be scalding them for having such a relationship on campus? Wasn't this a bit too accepting? She covered herself, though she doubted Nizu was even attracted to humans. Izuku groaned and looked between her and Nizu before sitting up. Seriously, didn't those parenting books tell you not to do what you just did, Dad? Nizu beamed. Indeed, they did, my boy. However, this is an exception. Now quickly to my office. We have much to discuss, then you can return here and continue your canoodling. Once again, my apologies, Yaoyorozu, but this is rather important. I'll only be borrowing him for a few hours at most. Izuku let his shoulders slumped and rubbed his face. Sorry, Momo. Guess I should have spoken to him earlier. It's fine, I'll just go downstairs and start working with Mei until you get back. Atta girl, Nizu shouted as he climbed onto Izuku's shoulder. Now quickly to my office. Who said I'm giving you a ride? I'm more than a little pissed at you. You have to, it's in your employee contract. Stupid contracts. Izuku grumbled as he left the room with Nizu riding on his shoulder. In a way it was rather cute. But also, why did Izuku call Nizu Dad? There was really only so many things she could do when her mind and body were stuck on Izuku. Trying to train just left her quickly frustrated that he wasn't here with her, but even if he was here they wouldn't be training. So she had tried to sit on his couch and read a book. That just left her feeling like she wasn't using her time efficiently. It was a vicious CYCL that had her going in circles for the better part of 2 hours before her stomach had the great idea of cooking something. Izuku's fridge was a weird mixture of well-stocked and barren. Well-stocked in that there were a lot of steaks, but really not much else. Still, Izuku did make amazing steaks. After a bit of scrounging around, she managed to gather enough ingredients for stir-fry, which hopefully she could cook. The question of why Izuku had called Nizu Dad still rung in her mind as clear as a bell. She knew his parents were gone, but did Nizu adopt him? But for how long? It just seemed so odd. Maybe that was why he had so much leeway. That and the fact that he was a one-man army that could take out an entire room full of villains with a glorified glue gun and a wrench that probably weighed more than her. And now she was thinking about Izuku throwing her onto the bed and just damn it, stupid hormones, stupid CC boyfriend. With a sigh, she pulled her hair back into a ponytail. You know, there's only one thing hotter than you putting your hair up into a ponytail. Izuku came from behind her, his voice low and so close to a growl that it grated along her spine. Instant goosebumps. He wrapped one arm around her waist and kissed her oh so delicately on her neck while his other hand undid her ponytail. And that's when you let it fall. Careful, she half-sung, eyes still on the food while her mind was anywhere else. I'll start to think that you only like me because you have a thing for my hair. Is that so wrong? He ran a hand through her hair and let it drop behind her. It's really lovely, long, silky smooth, and a appealing shade of black. Though, maybe we should dye it just to see what you'd look like. She laughed. And what color would we dye it? Blue. So I can ask you an endless number of questions. Or maybe pink. I was thinking a brilliant red. A red-headed Momo. Rolling her eyes, she pushed away from the stove and turned to look at him. That spark, that lustful light was still burning in his eyes from hours ago. And now she was horny. Well, hornier. This might be why people thought teenagers were just constantly horny. What did Nizu want? She asked just before kissing him softly on the lips. It didn't stay soft. And why did you call him dad? Izuku groaned when she stopped him from kissing her more. Going much further with dinner being cooked would likely end badly. For dinner? He held her tight and smiled at her. Well, technically he is. Before I joined you, he adopted me. Not because he wanted a son, I was just another part of his MSTR plan. Which was what we talked about. And what exactly is that plan? Just turning in his arms to resume cooking. He moved to join her, dutifully chopping more vegetables. Well, it was more about what I'm going to be doing once I graduate. As it stands, I'm the only student that doesn't have a career plan. The hero students have agencies lined up to take them, the general students have their colleges or jobs selected, and basically every other support student has their eyes on some company to join, or island. And you don't. I'm honestly surprised. It feels like you always have a plan. Their food sizzled as Izuku added more greens to it, the flames licking the pan as she began to stir it. What changed? I met you. He said it so simply, like she had just asked why the sky was blue. But for all the world it might as well have been a confession of love. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm going to give up some grand dream just to be with you. I've just been thinking for a long time that my end goal wasn't really the end. And you helped me realize that what I was going after wasn't what I wanted. My anger brought me here. But I don't think it can keep me here. If I kept on that path it would be all downhill. Izuku grabbed her hands and twirled her like they were on a dance floor before catching her with her arms crossed, her neck exposed to him again. His kisses licked her skin like fire. But since I met you, I started to realize that I can do better. And I really want to find out where this new path takes me. And where your path takes you. She leaned back, kissing him, one hand touching his cheek while his free hand pulled her shirt out and rested on her stomach. It was only the pop of their food that stopped the embrace. If we continue. She paused, letting the words drip off of her. We might end up burning dinner. What happens if we keep cooking, but I keep teasing you? I'll stop cooking. I'd hate for your cooking to go to waste. He ran his hands along her arms and guided her towards the stove once more. How about we finish, we eat, and have a good dinner with a healthy side dish of SXL tension, then, after dinner, you throw me on the bed and have your way with me. The words all but flew out of her mouth. She blinked, the heat of the moment was still there and the passion was still boiling, but it was eye of the hurricane. Wow, I honestly have no idea where that came from. Izuku just laughed. XXXX aggressive thorough examination. That was perhaps the best way to describe their night. Once the door was locked and the curtains drawn, Izuku had began to embrace her. Everywhere. There was not an inch that he hadn't kissed. Head, arms, shoulders, legs, stomach, melons, but likewise, his hands had groped her. Firmly, gently, sensually. And then there were his fingers. Those magical fingers of his had found their way into her, breaking through her reserves and giving her a sense of pleasure that was unlike any she had ever experienced. Momo let out as Izuku withdrew his fingers once more, thumbs still on that tender nub just outside and keeping her senses guessing. So far as the sea had been more than interesting, it had been fantastic. It truly was love-making. You're good at this, she half moaned as she watched his head move down towards her stomach. A few red marks where he had kissed, suckled, and bit her adorned her melons, and her nipples were still on fire and strong as rocks. He really was very attentive of her melons. His hand pressed down into her hip, holding her in place as he kissed her again. Going lower. Another embrace. And lower still. He looked up for just a moment to flash her a smile. He was enjoying this. A lot. But he could enjoy it more. I did some research after our first embrace. How am I doing? He kissed her. Right between her legs and his tongue penetrating her insides. That was enough to make her go cross-eyed. Good. She moaned again, hands sinking deeper into his hair as he continued to probe and tease her still sensitive walls. Really, really good. Everything had been going so perfectly. There was just one problem. She quivered as he left her again, his legs moving closer to her and his well-muscled body loomed over hers. He was strong. Really strong. It was like a dragon raging for battle and ready to devour her whole. Relax, he said softly, the LTX-clad tip pressed into her. I'm going to try again, okay? She nodded, biting her lip. He was too big for her. What if they couldn't make it work? Would that be the end of their relationship? What if she couldn't satisfy him? SEC was a part of a healthy relationship, wasn't it? They both tried to get it in. But there was just no way. He was just too big for her. Every way of entrance was barred by her tightness. Even when the path was cleared by his fingers or his tongue, she just wouldn't open up. Izuku kissed her again and smiled. Let's try changing our position. Posy, she screamed as Izuku flipped her, the bed squeaking as they both bounced on top of his bed. The new position was interesting. Izuku was below her, her legs on either side of his waist, and she was kneeling right on top of his LTX-tipped dragon. Just waiting for her to open up. Izuku laid on his back, smiling up at her proudly. There, maybe this will help. I'm not too heavy, am I? Izuku just raised an eyebrow at her and his teeth flexed. Never. Now just give it a shot, okay? But how would it? She stared down at where his hand was guiding her. It seemed even bigger now, just sitting on top of it felt like such an impossible task. This was it. This was how her relationship, hey Momo? Izuku said softly. She asked, looking him in the eyes. He looked so happy, calm, and just, so you're really appealing. She felt Izuku entering her through her entire body. His girth spreading her wide, and his length going so very deep. It was both painful and pleasurable all at once. Painful because it felt like he was going completely through her stomach. But pleasurable because it was section. That was the only way she could think of calling it. Mostly because her mind was now blank. Whoa, Izuku groaned, one hand on her hip while the other grabbed a greedy handful of her bee. He looked happy, kind of like a content puppy. His hips began to move. Tenderly, slowly, with purpose. Take it slow, okay? She nodded as she began to match his movements. He was rubbing her entire length, and the pleasure that he had built up earlier with his touches was acting as a foundation. She bit her finger and moaned, staring up at the ceiling for no reason as he went in ever so slowly, then out just as slow. Every purposeful move made her feel some new part of herself spark to life. Everything felt hot. Way too hot. Whatever it was, came way too fast and suddenly. She found her muscles spasming and she leaned forward, pressing her face against Izuku's knee while her hips began to buck on their own. Was this an orgasm? The scream that erupted from her said yes. You okay? Izuku asked her, whispering into her. She felt his hands wrap around her shoulders and keep her still. His hips still moved, just the slightest bit, rubbing her slowly and building towards something greater. Yeah. She smiled, kissing him ever so softly. You're still strong. I can keep going. Okay. He sat up, her legs now wrapped around his waist as he assaulted her melons with his mouth and a hand while he groped her butt. This position was nice. Perfect for kissing. Kisses were different during section. Almost like breathing. He continued to move, filling her with each passing moment. She could feel it. A second orgasm. This one was larger. Was it the real one? Already she felt like screaming. Then she felt Izuku swell. He stopped. Momo, he whispered against her cheek. His breath was both hot and cold against her skin. I'm going to come soon. Okay. She nodded. That was why he was wearing a condom, right? She was flipped onto her back. Hips up in the air as her back arched, Izuku grabbing onto her as he started to really P&D into. That second orgasm hit like a truck as Izuku pounded into her relentlessly. He felt bigger. So much bigger. She could feel everything about him from where the condom ended and onwards as he continued to swell. It felt like minutes and seconds switched places. Every move lasted for a decade while 1,000 passed in the blink of an eye. Izuku grunted, and she felt warmth spread through her as he slowly pulled out. She barely caught a glimpse of it as he pulled the condom off. It was a lot. But, at the same time, she wanted to know what it felt like raw. To feel all that inside of her. He tossed the condom into the trash and rejoined her in his bed. I think, she said softly, placing her head on his shoulders as the afterglow of he basked the room. I think we should do that more. Absolutely. Izuku smiled, grabbing onto her and holding her tight. He wrapped one of the sheets around her waist, while his free hand pawed at her beard. I knew you could fit. Yeah. I think I just needed to stop worrying. She swallowed and traced a finger along his E. Oh, you never did tell me. What was the plan Nizu wanted to talk to you about? I was kind of hoping we'd talk more about CC and how awesome your bub are. He laughed, kissing her on the forehead. But if you want to know, it's really simple. He wants me to become the next principal of UA. A lot had happened. Alright listeners, present mixed bombastic voice blasted over the speakers of the sports stadium. On to the first round of the tournament, and we're starting out with a blast. The previous winner from last year is first up, Katsuki Bakugo. The crowd roared, still buzzing from the events of the first years. Momo stepped out onto the field and felt that familiar jitteriness. It wasn't quiet nervousness, but it was still gnawing at her confidence. Katsuki was a strong fighter, one of the two she didn't want to end up against. And chances were she was going to have to go up against Shoto if she got through Katsuki. She kind of wanted one of them to beat the other before she had to fight them. She just needed to have faith in herself and all the growth she had done since she started working with Izuku. She had the skills, the ability, the strength, and most importantly, she had a plan to take Katsuki down. And his opponent, a student who transferred from the hero course into the support course and Katsuki's former classmate, Momo Yaoyorozu, don't think because she's from the support course that Momo is a pushover. Izuwasensi's drawl was as boring as she remembered. That's right folks, we might be seeing the second coming of the support devil, the support goddess. Great. They were comparing her to Izuku already. Those were some big shoes to fill. She would know. She tried them on once out of boredom. While Katsuki had gotten a cheer, she had gotten a little more than a mumble. This was worse than when she first stepped out onto the field a year ago. But this time, she was more than a little bit prepared. Kick his F, but Momozuku's voice cut through the crowd like a hot knife through butter. Even if he had graduated months ago and was technically busy with university work to become UA's next principal, it was a badly kept secret. He still lived on campus and worked there. Also, she still had yet to see him wear actual sleeves. At least she had managed to convince him that she didn't need a giant banner with her face on it. And that even if it would make Katsuki mad, it would also make her mad. The crowd began to roar after Izuku's cheering, and she felt her panic wear down. This was nothing. She could do this. She had plans for this. She was prepared for this. Katsuki glared at her. All the anger he had towards Izuku was directed towards her now. Which was good and bad. An angry Katsuki was a reckless one, but that recklessness could hardly be called an advantage. His quirk was fast, strong, and made for combat. But she was ready. Oh, was she ever? I won't go easy on you just because you're his girlfriend, you know, Katsuki sneered and cracked his knuckles. Good, it wouldn't be as fun if I get to say you lost because you were holding back. The words flew out of her mouth. Izuku's knack for insulting people had rubbed off on her in the worst way possible. Though, she did agree that Katsuki needed to be put in his place. With as much force as possible. He sneered. Is that why you're bringing so many items? I'm in the support course. She fluttered her eyes oh so innocently. We're allowed to bring items we make into the sports festival so long as we can carry them. Or are you afraid of losing to someone not in the hero course? Again. Oh, he was real mad now. Alright, Midnight called, waving her WHP at them. Enough of the banter, let's get this show on the road. Fight. Katsuki exploded towards her, using his quirk to fly at her. He wanted to end this quick. With any luck it would be. She grew a gas mask and chucked a few of her water grenades towards the ground in front of her. They wouldn't do much besides dampen the air and make his quirk harder to use, but the gas mask would throw him off. It worked. Katsuki backed off. He glared at the mist erupting from her creations, shirt covering his mouth. Well, her mask worked. Katsuki was under the impression that she unleashed some kind of knockout gas. But that would be too easy. Now, she just needed him to use his super move. It was strong not to smile when he did just that. She moved to toss another water vapor grenade at him. He shot it out of the air with surprising accuracy. Another, then another, each one getting closer to him and saturating the air with moisture. In a matter of seconds, both of them were completely soaked. You beach, Katsuki screamed looking at his hands. Water. Oh no, he found out her tactic. Too late. She moved in close watching as his hands sparked and failed to ignite for a second. Perfect. Air was easy to make. She could make a lot of it really quickly, and even keep it inside of her. She brought her palm towards his exposed stomach as he tried to move back. Then she unleashed it. A sonic boom erupted from her arm and made her shoulders shake from the recoil, but Katsuki, who didn't have the luxury of standing on his own 2 feet, was sent flying out of the arena. What an upset present Mick's voice screeched. Did you see that, viewers? How many tricks does this girl have? What just happened? Her quirk allows her to create any non-living object. That includes air. Aizawa commentated. If she prepares, there are few foes she can't beat. First, she used Katsuki's weakness to moist air against him, and tricked him into thinking it was a gas attack with her mask. She ended it by turning her arm into an air cannon that sent him flying. Wow, you sure you're not a little biased with that? I am. Momo has put in more work than most to get to her current level. Right, well, on to the next round, on to the semi-finals. Wow, short tournament this year. And we already have a finalist from last year. Can the tactical support Devil overcome the raw firepower of Shoto Todoroki? Or will we get another blowout? Why do you sound like a cartoon announcer? I have no idea. Find out next time on the Gaiac. If you finish that sentence I will end you. The continued sounds of strangling could be heard from the commentator's room. This match is between Momo and Shoto. Do your best. Part of her preferred present Mike's announcements. Aizawa made it feel like this was a police lineup. And it really only made her feel worse for her plan. Was it evil? Yes. Was it manipulative? Also yes. Would it work? Maybe. She met Shoto on the arena and smiled at him. He nodded in return, with what she could consider on his face. Unlike Katsuki, he at least respected her and even tried to talk her out of leaving the hero course. And then continued to encourage her after she gave her reasoning. All right, and begin. Oh Shoto, before we really start, would you mind shaking hands? To show there are no strong feelings. She walked forward, extending her hand towards him. Win or lose? Shoto blinked and looked at her hand for a moment before nodding and walking towards her. She could hear Midnight making an ah sound as they met in the middle of the area. Man, this plan was making her feel pretty shitty. Why did she let Izuku talk her into this? They shook hands and Shoto's face twisted in confusion. He pulled his hand back and looked at it. BLD, he asked. Sorry. It was the only way I could think of beating you. She clapped her hands in front of her and bowed for an apology. She just fell. Shoto blinked, then fell over. I can't feel my body. Looking at her own hands, Momo felt like she was an idiot. Mostly because she was. In her rush to apologize, she had stabbed herself with the same needle she had just stuck Shoto with. The one with the tranquilizer that would last an hour or two. Yeah, me neither. Was this really how she would lose her second-year sports festival? XXXX, you know, Itsuka has sworn revenge on you for not being able to face her in the finals. Izuku hummed in her general direction. He was sitting in the chair backward, fingers drumming along its back. He had such a smug smile on his face, she just wanted to slap it off of him. If she could move her arms. Are you here to laugh at me or make me feel better? She asked her giant, loving, but of a boyfriend. Izuku just shrugged. Both. You technically made it to the finals, but you also lost in the most humiliating way possible. Like you literally poisoned yourself. Thank you for reminding me, it's not like I was there or anything. She wanted to cross her arms, to help with her pout, but that wasn't happening. She didn't even know if the hospital bed was comfortable. Can you cross my arms for me? Izuku did so and kissed her cheek. You know you're really cute when you're pouting. That just made her want to pout more than one reason. Next year, I'm sure you'll win. Next year, I won't knock myself out. Next year she placed first. Partially because she finally finished her mic robots. Incoming call from Izuku. I swear if you put me as honey, bae, or anything else in your contacts, I will be cross with you. Midoriya, aka honey bae love. It was impossible not to smile, both because that was exactly what Izuku made her do and partially because of the ever so slightly spiteful contact name she had put Izuku in as. If he wasn't such a but she would have gladly just put him in as Izuku. Gesturing with her eyes, the display brought up some of the information on Izuku, including where the signal was coming from. Hey Izuku, she said softly into her helmet, still scanning the area as she finished her patrol. What's up? Oh, I just wanted to see what time you were coming home for dinner. I think you're really going to like this one. She could hear the same teasing snark in his voice she had grown to love, and that the students and staff of U8 as a whole had learned to hate. The first year had been rough, several students had actively challenged him. Then he showed up into the sports festival as the final boss of sorts. Most watched sports festival in years. He even volunteers to be the villain at the license exams because he's sadistic. She still loves him though, sounds like you have something planned. She sung into the phone, tilting her head to the side as she turned sharply. She looked down the streets and saw nothing unusual. I always have something planned. The growl Izuku let out was just like the one he made during section. It had an effect on her that she'd rather not have anybody else know about. And I think you'll like it. So, when you coming? I'll be back so soon, maybe 5 minutes? It was a quiet night, most were whenever Mirio was in town. It was strong to keep up with someone like him, but still even with the competition of Hawks, it was strong to complain about being the third best hero at the age of 23. Bakugo liked to claim that it was just because she was pretty. But numbers didn't lie. Besides, he was also behind Nijire. So soon, Izuku's voice sounded just slightly less calm than usual. Rolling her eyes as she made another turn, she hummed to herself. Well, I also need to take a shower, you know how my hair gets when I've been wearing the helmet all day. He growled again, less ceesy this time, and more like a puppy having its toy taken away. But I was hoping to what, that sounds like a good idea, come in through the bedroom, I'll set out your outfit. See you soon, love you. Love you. The call ended. As much as she wanted to catch Izuku with his pants down as he scrambled to get whatever he was planning perfect, she knew that it just wouldn't happen. Even if she were to show up now and try to surprise him, he would be sitting there looking like a snack with that cocky smirk and just waiting for her to join him for dinner. But she could make him sweat by showing up a bit late. But at the same time, she really wanted to know what he was planning. With an excited squeal, she did a loop in the air and shot upwards into the sky, the thrusters of her suit propelling her just beyond the city skyline. With all of the things she's made, the mic-robot into a functioning suit that was something out of science fiction was her absolute favorite. With it she could fly, fight, and take a hit or two. It just took a few years to get used to everything going on. And a lot of finesse was due to Izuku help. Naturally, he also had a suit, but all but refused to use it because he was stubborn and really had a thing for humiliating people. But only when they were an butt. Or a student. Okay, so she was in love with someone that was, in general, an butt to most people he didn't like. Which was a lot of people. Twirling in the air, she gave the city one last sweep, everything looking peaceful. She let herself drop to build momentum, then move herself forward, the location of home coming up on her display. She half expected Izuku to be waiting for her when she landed on the balcony of their bedroom. But he wasn't there. Instead, on the bed that they shared was a bright red dress surrounded by rose petals. The scent of his cooking filled the air. He was so up to something. And she was looking forward to it. Adjusting herself in the mirror, Momo looked herself over one last time. The dress Izuku had gotten her fit her perfectly. While it wasn't tight, it just looked like an extension of herself, with a slit along the left leg that revealed just the slightest tease of her thighs, and the top was low enough to make her cleavage modest yet visible. A lot of side boob though, she laughed, turning to the side and running a finger along the fabric that kept her sissy bound. The red dress made her look hot, appealing, sissy, and just downright gorgeous. Once again, Izuku's endless pool of talents surprised her. She wanted to see his face when she walked down to see him. With let her hair down and smiled. The finishing touch. Smiling to herself, she nodded and headed down. The small dining table they often used was set with a black tablecloth, and one of the most impressive meals she had seen Izuku cook was laid out on top of it. The smell alone made her want to sprint down there and start eating. And then there was Izuku. He was wearing a dress shirt that matched her dress and a set of black dress pants that completed the look. The top button was undone to show off just a peek of his tee, and his normally messy hair had been cut recently. There weren't a lot of haircuts that would suit his curly hair, but apparently he made an undercut look DMN good. And the way he looked carefully lighting the candle just put a smile on her face. It also made her want to run down there, jump, and embrace him. But there would be plenty of that later. Wow, you even have sleeves on. And they're not even rolled up. Not that she minded when he had his sleeves rolled up. His arms were in pichardias. What's the occasion? He looked at her. The witty reply on his lips died when his eyes went wide and his mouth dropped. She really did look good in this dress. She laughed, taking the last step off the stairs and moving towards him. What? You're the one that got me this dress? You shouldn't be so surprised how good it looks. It's not that, he whispered softly and pulled her into her embrace. No doubt the first of many for the night. It's just that every time I see you I need to remember that you really are that appealing. Every time I'm thinking about you and not looking at you, I think no, she can't be that appealing, but here you are, even more appealing than that. Now it was her turn to blush. If you're trying to turn me on, you had me at the stake. Good to know, but tonight is special. Do you know why? He pulled her away from the table and held her close, lips buried into her neck. She moaned at his kisses. And at her stomach for wanting his food. Well, it's not a birthday or anniversary. Nope, her shoulders fell under his assault now and he held out one of her arms. Did you get a promotion? He kissed along her arm now and held her hand gently, now facing her. There was a spark in his eyes that just sent a tingle all throughout her body. Try again. Did Mirio and Hawks announce that they're both madly in love with Nijire and fight to the death over her? Or did Nijire take both of them and they all retired, so I'm the #1 hero? He raised an eyebrow, lips on the top of her hand. No more books written by Mina for you. He moved down onto one knee and smiled at her, his hand pulling out a small. But, one knee. What? Knee. But, romantic dinner. Izuku in sleeves. Was this really happening? But no, the reason why tonight is special. He undid the box to reveal a twinkling ring to her. It wasn't a diamond, instead it was a brilliant green gem that just stood out to her like a lighthouse in the dead of night. Or in this case Izuku's eyes. Is because tonight is the night that I propose to you. Momo Yayorozu, will you marry me? She squealed. It was so happening. Okay, stay calm. She had prepared for this. Actually, she was going to do just this soon. She spent hours on this line. She was going to use it. There are a lot of things I can make with my quirk. She kneeled down with Izuku, her bare legs sticking out. She held out her other hand and created it, the ring she had been wanting to make for him for months. I can make a ring, but there is one thing I need you to help me make. Izuku's smile caused her to stop as he grabbed the ring in her hand and leaned forward, his forehead kissing hers. A family.